Hello, my fellow Westorians. How are we doing today? I'm starting this one off with a little bit of babble in case something's wrong with our stream, because, you know, that's stream life for you. You got to make sure everything's copacetic before you just launch right into your script, right? That leads to problems. So I suppose we sound okay? Waiting on the delay to figure out whether that's actually the case. Diggly, 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 diggly. I would do a little dance here in the meantime. Oh, look at my cool Sanrixian shirt. Yeah. North remembers. Ooh. I remembered to wear it. This one's very cool.
I love that shirt.
It's pretty awesome. There aren't that many of the gray ones out there. Most of them are white or blue, I think. Okay.
A cute exclusive t-shirt.
Though it's possible this opinion will shift after Valar Rereadis does A Dance with Dragons, to date, my experience has been that A Feast for Crows is the one book of the four before Dance that the initial opinions change the most after reread. And I think that is going to be true after A Dance with Dragons as well. I just wanted to throw that caveat in there. It was something I believed about Feast before we even started Valar Rereadis, and going through this has only reinforced that opinion. And a lot of you out there are the reason why. You've said the same thing. Listeners, viewers, you've said that, boy, my opinion changed on Feast after rereading. Some of you, that's a recent thing. Some of you read your second read of Feast was a long time ago, as long as the year it came out, or perhaps, you know, halfway through the TV show, anytime. There's all types of people exist in this fandom in terms of where they read Feast and other things. And this impact has been greatly increased by the TV show. So that's one thing that has changed, even though the book has been out for almost 15 years, or roughly 15 years, because of all the books that had plot lines that didn't make it onto the screen, or did, but in greatly reduced version. This book is perhaps the one that still has the most interesting of designations. Unknown, meaning unspoiled by the show. In this case, I'm neither praising nor criticizing the show. It's just a simple truth. There's a lot left that's mostly or completely unspoiled in general, but a huge slice of that remaining mystery pie belongs to the Crows for their feast. So I'm Aziz, with me is Ashea, and this is Valar Rereadis for A Feast for Crows, the wrap-up. With us are our regular end-of-book review, seven-pointed, all-star team. Starting with Lady Gwyn of Radio Westeros. How you doing, Lady Gwyn?
Doing okay. Oh, glad to be here.
Yeah, so you guys had a stream yesterday with one of our other guests here, Joe Buckley. So, hey, Joe, how you doing?
Hello. Apologies you can't see me. I'm the ghost today. Obviously,
Joe is the faceless man. So yeah, you guys did a stream on Stoneheart yesterday. That was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. I was in the chat for that, listening. Yep. So you guys are real warmed up on at least one particular subtopic, but we've got a lot of topics to cover today. And Nina is here as well. Nina from Good Queen Alley at Tumblr.com. How are you doing, Nina?
Doing good. Allergies notwithstanding.
Yep, that is that time of year, isn't it? Okay, so we have a lot of fun stuff for you today. We're covering a variety of topics, of course. We're going to do this a little differently. In the first three review episodes, we really followed a pattern of going through each POV structure-wise, but we're not going to really do that this time. Partly that's because of the difference in the way we approach this material, because so much of it is mysterious. When we're going through the arcs in the Clash of Kings, for example, you can easily say, well, this is where this part ends, this is where this part ends. Obviously, there's stories beyond that. But even in the case of, say, Arya or Catelyn, there's sort of a defined start and end point for what's happening in Feast and the end of Storm. It's really like a reset. So that is why we're going to cover things a little differently. We're going to talk more about themes and do a lot of predictions. And you are all welcome to ask questions, of course. You can direct your questions, that is, at all of us or one of us. You can disagree with things we've said in the past, or perhaps like some things we sort of take for granted, like headcanon style, and maybe it's correct. Or maybe there's something we overlooked. So first off, though, a couple of shout-outs to our supporters here. We've got Jeff Gnarly the Long Snapper, History of Westeros' First Sword. And, of course, we have our History of Westeros Dragon Riders. That includes Talanis the Talon, King of Gagassos, Rider of Telarius, Red Dragon with scales, horns, and talons of midnight black, and Hunter of House Black Cloud, the Stormrunner, King of the Sky, Rider of Heranicon, the Windworm, a dragon with scales of brilliant platinum silver, horns, claws, and fangs of pure white, with eyes the color of diamonds of fire. I think I said claws instead of claws there, but I think you got it. So, all right, we also have another way to support if you want to keep things simple. A little bit simpler than Patreon is Anchor support. You can find the links in the description. So, just an example real quick. Arianne, Aeron, Stoneheart, Victarion, Taena Merryweather, Darkstar, Lynn Corbray and company, pretty much all those Vale Lords with a little bit of exception, Garland and Willis Tyrell, all these Hightower, there are like 10 Hightower children in this book, right? None of them are in the show. There isn't even, the family Hightower is even mentioned. I was about to say Hightower is mentioned, but the actual Hightower is mentioned. So that wouldn't strictly be true. And mostly out are very different. Euron, the Citadel, the Faceless Men, Glass Candles, the Valonqar, the Iron Bank. I mean, those things were technically in, well, not Glass Candles. Those things were technically in the show. But the Valonqar was reduced to about a third of itself. Euron, of course, rough. That description probably fits about the same. Faceless Men, that probably as well. And probably the Iron Bank. They're all about a third or less of what they will be or are in the book. So, lot to, just right there, that sets the stage. So I'm going to start by asking each of my awesome guests what their general Feast opinion was, if they felt differently on this particular reread, if anything changed, and then we'll go more specifically through things specific with who's in blue here? Is that Lady Gwyn? Is that you? All right, well, may as well start with you then.
Feast, for me, it's simply the best book in terms of character development and exploring so many different themes and philosophical issues that are set up in the previous 3 books. It is absolutely no accident that my favorite characters are all Feast point of views, since, in my opinion, it's the most intensely personal book of the series to date. And that is something that just gets better. An opinion that just gets, more strongly held each time I reread it.
Intensely personal. That's a great way to put it. I like that. I might steal that. But no one will know because this was all under wraps. Joe, I guess you're in green here. We each have our own color within our document.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with anything Lady Gwyn said. I remember when we were doing Storm, she listed Feast as her favorite, and it was hard to disagree then. It's even harder to disagree now. It's just it's kind of a magnificent outlier to me. I get the impression, reading it the first time and now, that George is really able to just stretch his wings a bit and flex out when he wasn't as married to the main plot of the series as in terms of progression as much as he normally is. There's still key moments, but this is definitely him taking the chance that he can to just use some of his better language, and in the reading he really just kind of lets himself go with the more poetic moments and letting his messages come through stronger than ever, whether that's anti-war or anti-revenge or whatever. It's completely unique amongst the 5, I think, and it really is a cut apart. It makes it harder to compare, but also much easier to appreciate. It's just different.
Well said.
Yeah.
And
by
Nina,
the way,
what about you?
my text color is in pink because, of course, it is. Feast is it's an interesting book for me. I kind of put it as Feast. The sum of its parts is more than the whole, and here's what I mean by that. So Feast, as a whole book, doesn't work in the same way that, say, Storm or Clash or Game of Thrones works, because it's not telling the whole plot story. Like, you can't understand the whole plot if you're not talking about Feast and Dance at the same time, because they're talking about, the entire plot of the book. But, and I want to be really clear, Feast's arcs are so good. They are so strong. There is not a bad arc in that book. That this is why I say it's almost the sum of its parts is more than the whole. It has such strong character arcs, even though it's only telling half of the plot story.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, because that dichotomy of it's more focused on characters, like Joe said, and as Lady Gwyn said, it's intensely personal, and as you said, the plot is less of the focus, the character is more of the focus. And that's a great thing. Like, we love the characters. These characters are so well made. This world is living and breathing, and that is what we want more of. And quite frankly, if I compare it to Game of Thrones, the plot required Ned's internal monologue to be stilted in certain ways to not reveal things. And that perhaps prevented us from getting not that Ned's internal monologue wasn't fantastic. Of course, it's great. But he had to, I don't want to use the word cheat, but he had to avoid topics for Ned to think about. And that's just, there's really not as much of that, or at all, potentially, with these characters. So you get to really explore their feelings without these barriers, plot barriers in place. So that is I think that's a good way to put it, because it's a plot versus character dichotomy there. Here. So real quickly, 10 Cersei chapters, 8 Brienne chapters, 7 Jaime, 5 Sam, Sansa and Arya 3, Arianne and Victarion and Aeron 2, Ario, Hota, Pate, Aris, and Asha 1. 25 of 45 chapters are Jaime, Cersei, Brienne, and so that's well over half. And then we have 5 Greyjoy, 6 Stark, and 4 Dorne chapters. Now, with that in mind, all of those plot lines, Greyjoy, Stark, and Dorne, are all fairly prominent in and out of the Cersei chapters, because she's at the capital, and of course they discuss what's happening all over the realm. Another sort of recurring pattern is that the King's Landing chapter, the King's Landing POV, if there's a main King's Landing POV, is pretty much always the longest one. That pattern will be broken next book, though, because there's not stood out more on reread this time, with Fire and Blood in mind, with the show in mind, with just new opinions, with the time changing, anything. Maybe your opinions have changed on certain things, maybe you prefer certain things, who knows. Let's go in the opposite order this time. Let's start with you, Nina. What do you think, who
Cersei,
stood out for you this time?
In a strange way, she's sort of the central protagonist of A Feast for Crows. She gets the most time.
Yeah, isn't that right?
The action sort of reflects back on her or centers on her, so she is sort of the center protagonist. And I do, this is a very interestingly complex book, and I'm glad that we get the Cersei POV now rather than, say, in a Game of Thrones or in a Storm of Swords or something like that, because this is the book where Cersei finally has everything that she wants, but we are in her head as she is constantly fighting this terror, and it's a real terror that she has been fighting for the past 20 years. And to me, I feel a slight modicum of sympathy for Cersei, not ignoring that she does a lot of horrible things in this book, let's be clear, but it's real. This is not a baseless paranoia. She really knows that she is going to be murdered and she's going to see her kids die. She's desperate to avoid that, but she can't, and that is the one thing that she should legitimately be terrified of. So it is,
right. And how do we as people,
if you knew,
put ourselves in her place? There's nothing
that
like
you were going to be murdered, and the person you thought was your murderer was on the loose, you'd be scared out of your mind.
Yeah, I guess that's the closest we could get to it. Yeah, you're right. That's terrifying. So it's true. There is some sympathy for her there. And I think also with her feelings for her children, even though she's not a very good mother, she does have, that's something that is a strong, real human fear or feel, wanting to protect her children.
I
Joe,
would
what about
say
you?
Brienne again. However many times I read this, I think it will always be Brienne, forever Brienne. She's just kind of the point of the book to me. She's just embraced all the themes, all the things we're supposed to be seeing that we don't normally get to see is with Brienne, and it's just the most beautiful arc. Especially the further it goes on, it just manages to get better and better and better somehow. And those last kind of 3 or 4 are really, for me, just top of the series. I don't think they can be beaten. But I'll also mention the second half. Jaime's very much a tale of 2 arcs in this, one in the city and one back out on the road, and the second one is just very enjoyable for him. This time round, took a little bit more notice of Arianne and probably even Sam as well, who's you don't think of as getting a lot done in this book. He kind of just travels down and not a lot actually happens, but just his arc of kind of being the same old Sam at the beginning and finding kind of stronger Sam on the way, even though this is the much safer trip compared to his storm journey, but this is the one that actually changes him more, I'd say.
That's well said, yeah. And as well, I'd add to that I also looked, Ariane looked a bit different to me as well. I didn't pick her for my list of ones that stood out the most, but she was close, because there is a lot of history in her chapters, and just more. We're constantly on the lookout for where this Dornish plot is going, because it is one of these that was almost certainly not resolved on the show in a way that we think is gonna. Is she there?
Oh dear.
Oh,
Got it. Sorry. I'm having real sound issues. I'm gonna. You guys all know that, but so if things go pear-shaped, I apologize.
If you talk really loud, you might be able to hear.
What's that?
Out your window, just talk really loud.
Yeah.
Yell out the window.
So it's gonna be Jaime, Cersei, Brienne. Always. Jaime for his improvement arc. Just love being in his head while he's, traveling around the Riverlands, and even previous to that when he's still in King's Landing. Brienne for the purity of her soul. Both of them for the window that they give us into the devastation of the Riverlands, and Cersei for the window that she gives us into the politics of King's Landing, which she's horrible at. But still, I love it. I love to read her chapters. They make me laugh. And yeah, as bad as she is, I like the feeling of, having that little teeny bit of empathy for her, like you mentioned, Nina. But still, mostly she just makes me laugh. She's so awful.
I definitely wrote down Cersei just because of her overwhelming presence, and I tried to refer to her sometimes as like a fire hose POV, because sometimes there's just so much going on. Like someone brings up something important, and that makes her think of something else, and she thinks about that thing, and so you have two different topics to consider right there, because it's the thing that is the important thing that Qyburn is bringing to her attention, or someone else, and then the thing that makes her mind was like, oh yeah, Estermont. Yeah, I went there once. That's where I slept with Jaime, and we made Joffrey. And he's like, no, Estermont's important now because of the Dornish and the Dun. She's like, yeah, indestructible. So that is very fun as well. That is it's both informative and for the lulz, yes. But I also, of course, am going to continue to stan my man Victarion, the hamster philosopher. That's my newest term for him. Before I called him like the thick philosopher, but now it's the hamster philosopher, because he runs on that wheel. It doesn't go anywhere. He's spinning that wheel. He's thinking about all these different things. He's like, well, how do the gods work? How does this work? How does that work? He never figures anything out, but he thinks about them. And that raises important questions for the reader, and I love that. And I have high hopes for him, not just... I kind of think he's just going to die pretty quickly over in Slaver's Bay, but I have hopes that he doesn't, and he becomes like Daenerys' champion or something crazy like that. Like, I fight for Daenerys. She's not going to marry me, but I'm going to fight for her. So, he's like, with that burned arm, come on, he's cool. He's awful, but he's fun. And Arya stood out to me more this time, mostly because I had this new idea, this new theory that I'm now calling Doom of the Faceless Men. So even if that doesn't happen, even if that theory is completely off, it was really fun to have and think about and consider, and that was a completely new experience. So that alone has some value. Now let's switch gears to a similar related topic, but one that's a little more theoretical. Which characters do we think stand out as the most unpredictable? Like, where it's the hardest to see their arc, maybe because of confusion from the TV show or lack of TV show. Either way, that could work out. Fire and Blood may have added or obscured other details, or perhaps you just think the whole thing is mysterious. So, okay, let's go in a different order this time. We'll start with Joe this time, since you've been in the middle each time.
For me, the main thing, well, you know how much I like looking at chapter frequencies and where George decides to put who and whatever, all that kind of nerdy stuff. I go far down that well. But what stuck out to me most was structure-wise, just how much George actually laid out the Ironborn and Dornish storylines as like complete mirrors to each other. I think, like at a glance, if I asked you, you'd probably say, yeah, they're similar. But when you look at it, actually almost dead parallel from beginning to end in terms of where the chapters go, how many you get, where you get them, and in the storylines as well, in terms of they both start with hearing bad news about Balon and Oberyn and the kind of reaction to that. Then they get to making kings/queens, and then they end with, okay, well, we need dragons and we're going to go off and get them. And that obviously continues on to Dance. So that just the sheer mirroring of it is, considering that they're both new and George's obviously done this on purpose, is really interesting to me. Other than that, it's just kind of little things that you pick up as you go, kind of like Jaime's little attempts at being vulnerable again, how well he gets on being out on the road in a camp, and just right at the end there, I forgot really how he's not only trying to take on being Lord Commander and doing right by Tom a bit and everything like that, he is actually wanting to take some responsibility for the larger small folk. When the snow starts falling, he's realizing, oh, actually it's me, I have to feed everyone, I've got to actually take care of this, because if it's not me, it's Cersei, and that's not going to work, is it? So it's going to be me. So like that hope he gets, and I'm expecting that's just going to be derailed and he's not going to have any time for that at all, but it's nice that he's got that inkling to do that.
Yeah, because he's like, he was upset by Jenna's characterization that Tyrion's more like Tywin. So, but now, and he tried to be like Tywin just after that, and as I think all of us agreed, he more like was a Tywin facsimile, but not really like Tywin. He had like the trappings of Tywin, but internally, no. But actually having this job of caring for being in charge like this, that is like Tywin. Maybe not personality wise, but responsibility wise, and that is a better way to emulate Tywin. To do the jobs he did, but do them better, not be like him. Have his authority and wield it better, or a lot better, not have his personality and his life arc. Nina, what about you? You have some somewhat similar thoughts here, or?
So this is in terms of, what characters are sort of unpredictable going forward,
yeah.
Right? So for me, and this is going to sound really weird, but I believe it, Hota is the one that I have genuinely no idea where that story's going. I feel like with every other Feast POV, I have a general idea of where the story's going. I could be completely off base, but I feel like I have a general idea of like, okay, these are going to be the basic story beats. Hota, I think we will go to Starfall. I think we will maybe meet Wyla. I think we will learn some information that we need to know about Jon and the Tower of Joy. But other than that, does Darkstar try to get Dawn? Does he try to kidnap or marry Illyria? Does he try to, pull a Samwell Dane and go to Old Town? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Those are a lot of options there.
Does he kill him? Does Areo go back to Doran? Does Areo die? I don't know. So I have no idea where Hota is going. So that's my big question mark of the Winds of Winter.
I wonder if George is going to add a little bit more to Dorne in the books. He's like, boy, they just to make up for how they just cut it all off on the show. Because even those of you who have seen the show or didn't see the show, Dorne, it seems like they had plans for Dorne that they changed midstream and just cut it short. And so I wonder that's part of the reason, of course, that we have so much unpredictability here. But even if they hadn't cut it short, it still would have left a ton out. Like most of those things Nina named are completely reasonable possibilities. Yet even if the show had done a fuller version, a lot of that stuff wouldn't have made it in. I mean, Dawn, Darkstar, etc. was never even a consideration, I think, for them, or not much of one. And Lady Gwyn, what about you?
So this is weird, but I've been really involved with Cersei lately because I'm writing about her now. So Cersei, even though she's really predictable in most ways, Tyrion calls her utterly predictable, and I tend to agree with him, but she's just so bonkers. Like sometimes when I think about the things that she'll do going forward, I just think kind of the sky's the limit. So in that sense, she kind of is unpredictable in the way that absolutely insane people tend to be. So other than that, I think in terms of just simply this book on its own, if I was just reading this book and thinking, geez, who would I kind of not know or not be able to predict what's going to happen next? It's Arianne for me. And that's assuming that I hadn't read, her sample chapters from Winds. I would have been really left with this uncertainty of what the heck was going on there. I'm sure when I first read Feast, that's where I was at the end.
on, everyone. I don't know if they can hear us.
I can hear, I think.
What?
They can all still see you. Can anyone?
We're just gonna vamp for a little bit. I'm not saying that I'm the cursed one, but I am saying that things don't seem to go well.
Saying, yeah. Oh, bye, Joe.
Yeah, I can hear them.
I can hear them
just
now.
Couldn't take it anymore. This is just too.
Can you guys hear us? Okay.
Oh, sound is back from us. No, maybe not from us, but let's give this a second.
I see this comment. This should all go a lot smoother next year when they upgrade to glass candles.
Oh, here we go.
We're back, it looks like.
About to be
3 back. Aziz is back. Okay. Joe gone. Good now. I hear everyone. Okay.
You're not quite right. Aziz.
Okay.
The microphone is set. Talk.
Check, check.
Talk again, Aziz.
Check, check.
Talk.
Check, check.
Talk.
Check, check.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, that's what has to happen repeatedly. Where Joe's gone, but
Yeah, I saw that.
yeah, he had to pop out, I guess. But clearly, we're talk.
So,
Hello, hello. How's this?
We're good.
in happy news, I think I fixed my audio problem.
Hey, look at that.
Okay. So where were we? We were in the middle of Lady Gwyn, I think, right?
Yes, where I was talking about making fun of Cersei because she's bonkers
Yeah.
and being unpredictable, but also, Arianne in terms of just taking Feast as its own little piece. If you went back to when I first read Feast for Crows, she was probably the one that I found the most unpredictable.
Right on.
So I still do because I haven't studied her a lot yet. Coming soon, though. So.
Good answers. Yeah. So it sounds like a strong tendency to mention Dorne and Dorne-related plots there. Basically, all three of y'all mentioned that in one way or another. And for me, I'll throw in maybe most unpredictable. Yeah, that is tough. I could agree with y'all, but just to throw out something different, I'll say that I have a real hard time figuring out what's going to happen with Sam. Specifically, I can tell some of the plots around him. I have what I think are solid predictions, but him specifically, I'm not sure. And it's real tricky. One of the things that makes him so tricky is that of all the characters, he has a finger in the most plots. Maybe with Cersei as an exception because she's part of so much being in the capital. But Sam is part of so many of the magical plot lines, indirectly or directly, and he's perhaps the most connected to the two main overarching supernatural plots, which are, the fire and ice, meaning the dragons and the White Walkers. And he's got Aemon's stuff that he's just learned, and he's about to hear all these other things, and presumably the dragons will be coming to town soon. Maybe not Old Town, but to Westeros. And he's, of course, got all this knowledge about Northern stuff. So that makes it really hard to see how George is going to balance that and what he's going to do, because there's so many directions he can take Sam's story as an important observer. And let alone what he's going to do and what's going to happen to Gilly at Horn Hill and things like that. So I'm very curious. And Jake and Pate, all that. So much. Okay, so how about this next question here? Something that you didn't notice before, something besides a character thing, or maybe a plot line that you stood out to you more this time through. Nina, let's go with you this time.
So this is a really little thing, but I think that it speaks to a major theme of A Feast for Crows. Everyone is familiar with, Rhaegar's changes will be made, that he said to Jaime right before the Trident. I hadn't really realized or remembered prior to this reread that this is actually the book that Jaime remembers that happening in. This is the book where he remembers Rhaegar saying that. And the reason that I noticed it and the reason that I really like that it comes in Feast is because Feast is a book that is all about the false piece, and Dances is about it too, but certainly with Feast, this idea gets introduced, is the false piece is the piece you can't live with, the piece that is no peace, the piece that is built on bloodshed and violence and completely unjust crimes. So this is what Jaime is dealing with in the Riverlands. This is what Asha's Kingsmoot pitch is based on. This is what is at the heart of Doran's conflict in Dorne. Can you live with a piece that is built on this completely unjust basis? And I like that it starts with this memory of Rhaegar, because of course Rhaegar's plan is, I'm going to go to the Trident, I'm going to take up arms for my insane father, I'm going to kill Robert in a very justified rebellion, and then we'll talk peace, and then we'll talk terms. And it's, no, you can't do that. You can't make this sort of false peace. So I really like that little historical anecdote comes in to set up this major theme throughout the whole book.
That's really well said. Yeah, that's very true. As the changes and thinking about the no justice, no peace, I suppose, is a simplified version of that. And it's so very true. You're right, and it really is reflected in almost every plot line, if not every plot line. Yeah, maybe just every plot line. Lady Gwyn, how about you?
Well, I'm going to go all the way back to the prologue chapter for this one. Pate's chapter, I realized, reading this time around, introduces this theme of convergence, which is a major theme of Feast and Dance. From a meta perspective, it's the largest issue George encountered with the mechanics of the story while writing these two novels, moving towards the climax of the series. It's very important, obviously, that far-flung characters and settings begin to come together. And it all starts here in Feast. This is where the contraction begins. One example actually is the very first word of the novel. It opens with the word dragons, after which, we hear about news of dragons. And then throughout Feast for Crows, news of dragons keeps coming up again, how this news is spreading. You see it in numerous point of views. All of this is converging towards that point, which has yet to come, but inevitably will. Daenerys coming to Westeros with her dragons. And it's just one example of those kind of converging threads as we start to see things, that inevitably are going to link up in the upcoming story. So.
Right on. Well said. So let's also talk about things that stand out about why Feast is different. We have, for example, I think that one thing that's interesting to me is that it has a theme in Clash of Kings was the rise of the supernatural. That there's a lot more of that detail and delving in Clash of Kings than there is in Game of Thrones. But Feast has the feel of Game of Thrones in that has a lot of setup for later things. And it also has the rough length of a Game of Thrones. But unlike all the other books, except maybe A Dance with Dragons, which leans into this pattern a bit, but we're not there yet. So length of chapters changed dramatically. Narrative shift, as we've already somewhat covered, more character focused. And of course, the splitting of the books is a big change in the narrative focus as well from a structural point of view. And then we have things like the change of POV names, things like that. So let's get one or two takes from each of y'all on any or all of those subtopics relating to why Feast is different. This time we'll start with Joe.
He's not here.
Oh, Joe's still not here. Okay. Well, remember, I can't see.
Right. Joe's not here. I will say Joe's thing because I totally agree with this. And when I saw he had written this here, I was like, damn, I wish I had said that.
Well, now's your chance to usurp it. All right. Let's be Ironborn. We'll steal his point. Yes.
Just steal it from him. No, all credit to Joe. But from the meta point of view, I loved this. It's the beginning of stuff we don't have an ending to yet. It's a whole new era where, you got the first 3 books where things kind of conclude for a lot of people, or conclude ready for the next chapter, I guess. And Feast is just very different feeling in that way.
Yeah. Well said. Well, and what were you going to say in addition to that?
For my own self. So now I'm Lady Gwyn, being myself. There's the fact that there's so much more internal development, which you kind of mentioned when you talk about narrative shift. That's what is so much more getting inside characters' heads in Feast. A lot less kind of actiony stuff, but yeah. I love that interior stuff. And I wonder if this is George simply perfecting his relationship to his characters, or is this really by intent and design that was what he wanted out of this book? I haven't really figured that out yet, but either way, it's a great effect.
That's a good side point there about the battles. There's setup for battles, a couple in particular, but there's only a few fights. We see Victarion fight in the shields. That's probably the biggest fight in the whole book. We've got
right.
Brienne fights some brave companions, and then more brave companions, and then what else is there? There's very little actual fighting, which is. I mean, there's plenty of violence, obviously. There's Qyburn's torturers and some awful things like that. But yeah, it's really interesting in that sense. More character focus, less war, less battle. I think I made the point in our wrap up on our episode 12 that something along the lines of the fact that most of the ends of the books are one big reveal. Whereas the Feast is a lot of small reveals and small setups, or small, medium. Anyway, and Nina, what about you? What did you think here?
Well, the one thing, and this has always struck me as very interesting about Feast, is that Feast is a kind of odd middle child of the books, in that it's it's not only responding to something that didn't happen, which is the 5-year gap was planned, but that obviously didn't come to fruition. So Feast is sort of the response of, oh, well, I'm not doing that, so now I have to rework the plots. But it's also a book that sets up. In other words, George R. R. Martin thought, oh, I'm going to publish a sequel in a year. Then 5 years later, he published A Dance with Dragons, which changed significantly. And we know that, based on what he said, it changed significantly in the writing. So it's a book that is coming off of something that didn't happen, leading into something that happened, but not necessarily in the way that the author was envisioning it would happen when he was writing A Feast for Crows.
Right on. Okay, so let's take a few questions here. I've got a couple sent ahead of time from people, and maybe one or two from people who are live here. This is a great summary written by patron Paul Berry that I think reflects a lot of people's thoughts on the reread. Similar-ish thoughts were given to us by other regular commenters like Tree Girl and Archmaester Rennie, two of whom those are two who have read the books when it came out and have had a nice long time to reconsider it, like myself and a lot of us. Paul Berry says, I have enjoyed all the rereads, but this was my favorite. Gonna miss it. One thing I really didn't expect was all the Dunk and Egg parallels. I remembered the shield on Tarth and the symbolism of not really a knight, but more knightly than anyone. But I was blown away by some others. Brienne's chapters gave us the Broken Men monologue, but the Sworn Sword shows us the recruiting of those small folk fighters and really the same debate. Foes charge them in the same way, trying to vanquish them quickly, underestimating their prowess. There are many times you could imagine them saying each other's lines. Dunk could certainly say no chance, no choice many times. At the Whispers, I could imagine Brienne saying, I'm better with a real sword. Hell, they even scratch insect bites on their necks the same. I didn't even notice that insect bite one. That's really good. So let's see here. Lady Gwyn, your notes are first here. What did you think about this overall?
Yeah. Well, I'm very glad that Paul mentioned the Sworn Sword, because George wrote those in parallel. I mean, very, very close. The Sworn Sword published in 2003, Feast for Crows in 2005. And he was admittedly including hints about Dunk's descendant within the Feast for Crows. So the sheer number of large and small ways that he ended up doing that is simply stunning to me. And rereading, I feel like you notice something every time, a different thing, like the insect bites. I mean, it just feels like it's a bottomless well once you really start trying to pick it apart. And it's just, yet another thing that I love about Feast for Crows.
It's so good in that way. You're right there. When you read something for this Xth time, when you've read it enough times and you still find new things, that does really give you that sense that, like, if I missed that, then what else did I miss? And there's that bottomless well feeling you're talking about. That's a great way to put it. Bottomless well. Yeah. Because it keeps on giving.
It is.
and you don't really get a sense that it will stop. Nina, what about you?
Well, I definitely think that this feels like the book where he decided to make Brienne Dunk's possible great-granddaughter. And I don't mean possible in the sense that, we don't know that they're related. They very clearly are, but in the sense that I don't know how many generations, but I just kind of headcanon that it's sort of great-granddaughter. But no, absolutely. Even though I've brought up in the past where, like, there's a moment during the tourney of Bitterbridge that feels extremely similar to a moment in the Hedge Knight in terms of their fighting style. So, I can definitely see the parallels, but this feels like the book where George R. R. Martin decided, this is the character that I'm going to make the bloodline descendant of Dunk, because there's so much focus in Brienne's storyline on true knighthood, and can you be a true knight if you're never given sort of the formal credentials of knighthood, which, spoiler, yes. So it's just so nice to kind of really dig into those parallels, both on a, I don't know if that's the word I want to use, and a thematic level.
Okay, yeah, and that's another thing we should mention. It probably would have come up eventually if we hadn't, but just this, Paul has raised it indirectly, the idea of there's so many parallels. There's lots of parallels. George loves to do that, but I think he's more adept at it than he was when he first started the books. I mean, he's obviously a really skilled writer, and he was a really skilled writer before writing the series, but he hadn't written anything like this before it. So he gained new experience and knowledge and does things differently. Just as as analysts and fans, we have learned over time how to interpret his material differently. And it's all part of that same process, I think. So looks like Joe is back. All right. Good timing. What about you here? What do you think about this paralleling, this feel for the book, and what do you have to say about that?
Well, firstly, just apologies for dipping out there. When you asked me to come on this, I said to myself, I'm going to mess it up 3 ways, no more, no less. So I've done my camera, I've answered a question that you didn't ask me, and now I've had a power cut. So any more, and you can tell me off, but that's fine. I can pick it up now. Okay. So I think I'm in the right place. Well, I know I'm in the right place because I always agree with Nina, but I agree with Nina here specifically about this knighthood theme, because I think it's just the next step along, because Clash was mainly filled with Sandor Clegane's kind of hate for the whole notion and just wanting to throw it all out. Then we get Storm with Jaime, which is our first real actual knight POV, and his difficulties with vows and how you keep it, and his disparaging of it. So it feels like George wanted to use Feast to say, okay, this is how it should actually be done. This is what a knight looks like. And it's not even technically a knight, even though we know she is, really. And again, like I said earlier, it's just great because Brienne does fit all those ideals perfectly, and she really is the flag bearer of the book for me.
Very well said. Just maybe to add to that, I like that pattern you established there with Clash being filled with Sandor's hate for the idea, Storm with Jaime's difficulty over the vows, and if we go back to the first book, we have the dream of knighthood as expressed by not just Sansa but Bran, who was obsessed with the Kingsguard. It's like one of the first things we learned about him is he wanted to be a knight. So that is really good as a theme that runs through the whole books, kind of escalating each time. I wonder what we'll say about this when we talk about knighthood and A Dance with Dragons. Yes, we'll see. So, and another thing about this too, the bloodlines is a really big issue in this book, whether it's talking about, is there power in King's blood? maybe it's a question I have for a little later in here, but it pops up here as well. Just the idea of Brienne's ancestry, and then you get to like goofy ideas like Renifer Longwaters and his Dropo dragon and his his royal blood and all that. So George really plays with the idea there, and I like to see it done in so many different ways. So here's another question. This is from Jenny C. This is more of a comment than a question. She has a question that I think is fairly straightforward, but a comment that I'm completely unaware of. She says, Cat of the Canals, Arya realizes that the Faceless Man taking all the waif's father's goods is the exaggeration and says it must be 2/3. How does she know it's 2/3 specifically? I think it's that's basically how they operate. Often it's 2/3 is what they require. Now, a bigger question might be, how do they actually determine what 2/3 of someone's wealth is? Like, how do they go about doing that? But we don't need to get into that. Does anyone else have a different answer here, or is that kind of what y'all were thinking? Or certainly feel free to expand on the waif and the lying game in general if you feel like it too. But
no, that feels pretty straightforward. 2/3 just feels like a sort of, well, it's not everything, but it's a lot of things.
It is a lot. Yeah, geez. But she leaves a comment here that's news to maybe all of us. It's certainly news to me. Jenny C says, there's a real-world convicted poisoner named Baba Anuchka who would price her potions, meaning her poisons, based on the buyer's means. So she also would look at the person's wealth and ability to buy and price it accordingly. So I wonder if that is an influence on George. I'll have to do some more research on Baba Anuchka. That's very interesting. Thank you for that tip, Jenny. Also, a super chat from Dorota Zaranaska says, Jaime's dream. During one of my rereads, I started to believe the way Joanna refers to father, and Tywin hints that Cersei and Jaime may be kids of Aerys. Even if you disagree, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, this is an interesting subject. I don't think Cersei and Jaime are kids of Aerys. However, it was a long-running theory for quite a while, and it was pretty valid because there was a lot of connection between these characters. Maybe Jaime less so, but Cersei and Aerys, obviously, there's a lot of like a huge number of parallels. So it's supported, except for when we get to the World of Ice and Fire, which came out in 2014. George very clearly stated the birth dates of these characters, and it doesn't really line up. He was pretty specific with where Aerys was and where Joanna was at the time of their birth, and it doesn't really work. So I think he may have even done this on purpose because it's so specific. It's seems geared towards eliminating that theory. However, it's not 100% off the table, but that was a real shot of cold water to it. Does anyone else have a different take there, or is that basically how you feel? Or if you have any other interesting thoughts from before that reveal, because I think it was really interesting when that theory was valid, but or more valid.
Well, I would just want to say that the thing from the World of Ice and Fire, the language he uses is which I agree, it was a big shot of cold water to the theory, but the language he uses is that after a certain point, Joanna was seldom in King's Landing, and I always love to point out that seldom isn't never. Seldom actually implies that she was in King's Landing.
There was at least once.
At least once during that time period. So I don't think he closed the door completely.
I agree.
And like you said, there is so much Cersei. We just finished including that in our upcoming episode, and there's so much Cersei Aerys stuff, which, could just be because they're in a similar situation and things are, they have a similar temperament. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're related, but there's those hints are there. So red herrings or not, time will tell, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts on that, Joe or Nina?
I'm very, very, very strongly of the opinion that all three of Tywin's children are both biologically his children and completely 100% Tywin's children. They are Tywin's children in every single sense of the word, which is very unfortunate for them because being Tywin's child is probably the worst thing that could happen to you. So here's a comment from Sicarius 071 about the concept of
buying based on means. It's he says, or she, they say the concept pops up in a bunch in storytelling. The Bible makes reference to a parable where a poor man giving a small amount is more meaningful because of what the value means. That's a good point. Yes, that also is brought up in A Song of Ice and Fire with the concept of sacrifice. Melisandre says, a man with 1,000 cows gives one. What is he truly given? But if you give your only cow, yeah. If you give your only, but let's not call daughters cows though either, Melisandre. What do you really mean there, Red Woman? But it's true that it's not certainly not an invention by George, and probably not even an invention of from the Bible. It's probably just a human concept that's existed for a long time. It's a basic tenet of proportionality. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Good comment though, for sure. Well, let's talk about themes and structure. There's so many powerful themes in this book. It's a thing that we've talked about, really makes it stand out. The character stuff, especially identity, is a huge one. We talked about knighthood a bit. We talk about oaths and faith. With the Faith of the Seven coming up, that's a whole nother angle to it. We got the Kingsguard, the Night's Watch. That's always a thing. Duty versus love has been a theme throughout the books. We also have a theme that kind of applies to that roughly. We have a lot of kind of infiltrating characters either in disguise or pretending to be something they're not, or both. Alaris Sorella is a pretty straightforward one. Jaqen, Arya, and the Faceless Men, that's just a bottomless well of another sort. We got Shadrick getting into Littlefinger's household. We got Thomas Evans in Riverrun. We got Osney Kettleblack not actually going to the Night's Watch, but that idea was floated. It was a plan that just didn't happen. We have Seduction is a pretty strong theme. Cersei, Taena, the Kettleblacks, Aurane Waters. I see a Lady Gwyn added here. That's a good one. And so that raises you wrote a question here, Lady Gwyn. This is a good place to discuss some of these ideas here with this question. You brought up interesting to consider in the case of both Taena and Aurane, who is seducing whom? Great question. What do you guys think? Joe, we haven't heard from you in a minute. What do you think about this seduction topic? And I see you maybe have written Littlefinger on here. I wrote Littlefinger as someone who's trying to seduce someone. He's not really getting there, we hope. And you wrote, man, is that worse than I remember? So let's start with you there.
He's always worse than I remember. I think I consider him bad, and then I read again, and he gets worse and worse every time. But especially in Sansa's last chapter, kind of near the end there, towards the end of the chapter, I mean, it's just worse than I remember. I know he's bad. I know he's abusing her and all these things, but it's just worse when she comes in and sees him there down at the Gates of the Moon, and he makes her kiss him again. And it's the language. It's always the language George uses. That it's always a dutiful kiss or whatever. It's very clear Sansa does not want to be doing this. But not only is he making her now, he's like commenting on performance. Like, that kiss isn't good enough. You need to be doing a better kiss. As if there's any more like disgusting concept to get across. And it's really, really prevalent throughout like any kind of abuse case, like real world, that you make the victim one, feel like they've done wrong, and then two, that they owe you something, that you owe me a kiss. And again, she's like 13, so this is absolutely going to work on her, even without this whole you owe me for your safety, I'm the only thing keeping you alive thing that he's got going. But then the chapter even ends with him asking for another one, which I think is what I actually forgot, because we get this whole plan of, okay, here's Harry, and you're going to do this, and then I'll give you Winterfell and an army, and everything's going to be really, really good. And now you actually have to pay for it with this other kiss. And it's really left quite open, and actually more sinister level than I remember. And thankfully, we do have the Winds preview chapters, so I don't think anything that bad does happen. But if you don't have those, you can read into it that this is going to be a building thing, because I think because he has this this Harry thing, he knows he's kind of running out of time with Sansa. She won't be 100% in his grasp forever. So even though he probably knows it's bad for his overall plan, he can't help himself, and he's going to take what he can to be really crass and lower the tone here and make everyone very upset.
Yeah, that's really well said, Joe. And I think just to add to that, before I turn it over to Nina and Lady Gwyn here, who I definitely want to get takes from on this subject, I think society has become more savvy to the ways that this type of manipulation happens. Like the techniques that Littlefinger is using are more spoken of openly in the world today than they were even when this was written, or even say 10 years ago. Like the whole world has become more aware of the patterns of abuse. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's appropriately addressed everywhere, but it is more part of the conversation. And so this additional awareness helps us see Littlefinger's using these techniques. He's using them, and some of us maybe didn't see all of them because we didn't necessarily recognize them. It's clear what's happening, but as you say, some of the details are perhaps some of the insidiousness is easy to perhaps skip over or just not notice fully because you're not. It's like we're not this type of person. We don't know the methods used by abusers, right? Except for what we've learned, or hopefully, there's obviously some exceptions there, but for most of us, that's the case. So, Lady Gwyn, you have some thoughts around this and the general topic here as well.
About seduction?
Sure. Yeah. This general. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I was my thoughts were more of going back to Cersei and Jaime and how they are, they usually are mirrors to each other. So when you see the two of them, they're presenting some sort of inversion a lot, and you got Cersei trying her best to seduce all these completely unsavory people, which like you said. But the flip side of that is who was really in the driver's seat there, because we suspect that at least Taina and possibly also Arain are working for someone else. But then you have Jaime, who's resisting seduction over and over, and I never really thought about it until I read this, but and I thought about his arc, and it comes up. I might have even missed one. Cersei, Gatehouse Amy, Pia, Hildy. Mm-hmm. He's just got women throwing themselves at him, and it's part of his improvement arc. Yeah, that he is really resisting.
He's a celebrity.
He's determined to be the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Something and related to that, I'll add that something that I didn't really fully grasp on prior reads was just how big a deal it is to Jaime that Cersei cheated on him, and how that is reflected by this, about how this, like, of all the things she's doing, it's almost not a good look for Jaime, because she's doing so many awful things, but he keeps coming back to the cheating. That's the thing that really gets him. So Nina, if you want to comment on that or any other of these related topics, I'd love to hear it.
Absolutely, because that's actually a point that I actually wrote something on with respect to this, and I think I added it in the Valar Rereadis, but who knows what I wrote. So
it's all about
is that Jaime at the very end toward the end of the book, he sees Ryman Frey's sex worker, and she calls herself the Queen of Horrors, and Jaime's like, no, that's Cersei's title in his head.
Yeah, that was
vicious. What makes it especially heart-wrenching for me is that the very next chapter we see Cersei, and Osney is really forcing sex on her. He is the one who is setting the place, the time, how it is happening. He is the one who is objectifying her to the extent of, no, keep your crown on. I like your crown on. It's that's just adding to it for him. And it's, Jaime is thinking about Cersei as Cersei is the Queen of Horrors. Cersei is sleeping with all of these men. Cersei is completely unfaithful. And it's not that it's untrue that Cersei has slept with multiple people, but you're seeing Cersei in a position where this is an act of desperation. This is what Cersei believes is the only thing that can keep her safe from her and her son being murdered. And it's very, very heart-wrenching and sad to me.
Yeah, and it's interesting too about their relationship so tight, yet they both have not discussed with each other one of these really crucial personality aspects. They have. Like Cersei never told Jaime about the Valonqar, and Jaime doesn't sound like he ever fully invested Cersei with the story of Aerys and all that and why. No. It doesn't seem like he ever really told her all his reasoning, like what he told Brienne. That was not just a big deal because he told someone, but that it wasn't Cersei, Or am I? Do you guys have that impression that he never told Cersei about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Absolutely.
Right on.
100%. Which makes me question their relationship more and more every time I reread, because of exactly what you said. They haven't shared these most deepest, sort of darkest things from their psyche with each other. So when they talk about completing each other, or Cersei thinks that, I guess, and how close they are, no, I don't really buy it, because they haven't really shared their souls with each other, have they?
No, yeah,
and they both do end up telling people who are not their partner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's great, because yes, Cersei tells Taina.
Cersei tells Taina and sort of tells Qyburn.
Yeah,
too.
sort of. Not all the details,
Qyburn.
but some of them. Yeah, you're right. So that is really quite telling.
I think it's just a more legacy of Tywin. Like, you're not supposed to be vulnerable and admit, like, hey, I'm really worried about this prophecy.
Yeah.
Oh, I had this really bad time with my boss. You don't say that kind of thing, because you're supposed to be the warrior and you're supposed to be the pretty queen. We don't have those problems, because Tywin sure as hell never came to them and was like, oh, I'm having a rough day at work. That's
a lion never cries.
Exactly right. So there's just never got across. And it's interesting that they're both so similar. Whereas Tyrion has to wear what he's upset about on his sleeve because everyone can see it. So it's completely, he doesn't get to internalize as much, other than the Taisha thing, which he has, but that's also known by other people. So it's a bit different from those two who can keep their secrets 100% in, whereas Tyrion doesn't really get that luxury, so to speak.
Really good. Yeah, great take, Joe. Okay, let's do one more question and then take a mid-roll break. And then after the mid-roll, we're going to come back and talk about the rise of magic. So that'll be exciting. So this last point here for now, I want to talk a little bit about Bloodlines. I made the joke about Yennefer Longwaters, and it's one thing that stood out to me this time too that I hadn't really credited before was just how much Blackfire / Aegon the Sixth young Griff setup there is, even though he's completely still unmentioned to this point in the narrative, other than some clues and indirect hints that he exists. But the whole, the clanking dragon inn stuff, but also, which that's been known for a long time. But one thing that I paid more attention to this time was who might fight for whom when it all comes down. A big clue was Crackclaw Point when Brienne goes there and they're talking about, we're good dragon men up here. And then how do we get George gives us a clue as to whether the Crackclaw men will fight for Aegon or Daenerys when we're told that they were brought into the fold by Visenya, and that makes me lean Daenerys there. But even that's not certain. And then we have the extension of this thought process. Like Nina, you made a point during Valar Rereadis about Jaime inspecting the walls and how the gates and how that might be a clue that Aegon's people are just going to be let in rather than have to fight their way in or something like that. So was there anything along these lines, or here's the general question. You don't have to speak to this actual question if you want to speak to something that's related to this, but is blood actually special in this? Is that something that George is speaking to? We have all these concepts. King's blood matters, but then we have, when does it stop mattering? How many generations before it is meaningless? Like this, again, we come back to Yennefer Longwaters, or a parallel character like Brown Ben Plum, who both of those guys relate back to the same person, by the way. I think I mentioned that at the time, but it's kind of fun to note. So what do you guys think? I'll start with Joe this time. What do you think about Bloodlines and what this book tells us about that, or what it pushes back against?
It's interesting that we get so much talk on Bloodlines because we're not really any plot lines that are supposed to feature. So, like, we're not with Melisandre, we're not at the Wall, we're not with Daenerys and young Griff yet. So we're not actually supposed to focus on it. But like you say, we do. George keeps bringing it up. I think to maybe say that some of it is kind of self-fulfilling prophecy in its own way. Like, you can make someone special just because you say they are. Because like Sam's whole journey is based on protecting two people at the opposite ends of life in Mance's child and Maester Aemon, who are being protected due to their blood. So you can just make people, like, they wouldn't have gone on that journey without that perception of their blood being. So that's changing things. So I think it's George kind of saying you can make this stuff up to a certain degree and maybe don't put so much in what Melisandre's really confident in. And some of it is obviously true because we've seen it work, but some of it is not, and some of it's people seeing things that they want to see rather than based on reality. It's almost kind of like a mum's dragon type thing. You can see it, but it doesn't mean it's got all the substance in the world.
Well said, yeah, and I think that concept is reflected in a lot of different characters. Melisandre and Euron are probably the top example I can think of. Characters that have real magic but use tricks to make themselves even look even more magical. And perhaps the place that reflects that the most is Harrenhal, where there's all these rumors about ghosts and stuff, and that might be true, but people believe it's true for sure, and that they act as if it's true. So acting on belief, it's sort of like acting on what's true, whether it's true or not, it may as well be true in terms of how people behave. And it looks like, Lady Gwyn, you have cited a line that really encapsulates this concept quite well, that was introduced books ago.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. There's this parallel with Varys's comment, power resides where people believe it resides. So if we set aside dragon dreams and controlling dragons and that sort of thing, if we can, the more mundane ways of dragon blood might be used in the future to bolster claims, for instance, are exactly shadows on the wall. So this might come into play with the Aegon plot in the future. And just as an aside, speaking of that, you mentioned Blackfires, and that made me think about how this was really where, when George, we mentioned already that he was writing The Sworn Sword kind of in parallel with this. And that's where all the Blackfire background was really given to us at first. So I think he's thinking a lot about how that theme is going to come into play in the future. And it might be important, like if we bring back in controlling dragons, that could be very important there. But in terms of making a claim to something based on that bloodline or any other bloodline, it's very hard to say whether that's really important.
Yeah, it really is.
They don't have DNA tests.
Yeah, there's kind of two angles to it, right? Like the human side of it, whether your birth and blood matters, but there's also the magic and what actual effect that has beyond perception and socialization. Nina, anything to add to this?
Yeah, just in a sense. Well, first of all, I think it's kind of funny that we get Renna for Longwaters, and Jaime's very dismissive of the idea that he could in fact be a Targaryen descendant, even though he very clearly is. Yeah. So it's almost sort of a joke on like, oh, here's all of the secret Targaryens, but in the universe, no one believes in the secret Targaryens. So that's just sort of funny. But no, I think bloodlines matter in the sense of identity, in the sense that they give you a sort of personal identity. In this book, it's very much Arya and Sansa are pretending to be people who are not Starks, while always remembering that they are Starks and acting like Starks, both of them. So in a sense of giving up a sense of personal identity, yes, bloodlines matter very much. But in the sense of, that's only one part of you, and what you choose to do is just as much, if not more important than the families that you were born to. So it's what you choose to do is really what defines you, and your identity is just sort of part of that.
Yeah, well said.
I think probably Mance might be the best representation of that, and it links into Mance's son being taken away, because Mance isn't a king. He just started calling, like he even says, I don't wear a crown, I don't sit on a throne, I don't do any of this. There's no connection between me and Joffrey at the time. So what difference does it make if someone just walks into Flea Bottom and says, I'm king of Flea Bottom? Does that make their blood special? It's exactly what Nina said. It's what you do with the axe. Mance is kingly, and if it walks like a king and talks like a king, does that affect does he have king's blood? So it's a really interesting argument.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think Mance is a fantastic example there of the whole thing. Okay, let's give a few shout-outs for our mid-roll here, and then we'll come back with some talk about the rise of magic. Got a lot of cool notes there. From the depths of Flea Bottom, Lord Ken of House Hammer is declared for Queen Carrie, Fire of the North, who recovered Dark Sister from beyond the wall. A laurel of glory in the name of love to Bud of House Beresford, Knight of Tolkien and Arbiter of Scotch. From Sandy the Dragon, Blood of Queen Daenerys and Lady of Jameson. Couple of blood riders to shout out as well. That would be Koakoi, called Sunpiercer, wielder of a dragonbone bow, and Kokavo the Tamer, wielder of the wildfire whip Gehenna. Also want to shout out our northern champions. If I can find the list. Where'd they go? There they are. J. Wilson, Winter's King. We got Winter's King, Lord of the First Men. There are dueling kings there. Lady Ardras, Mother of Wolves, is wielder of the Valyrian steel claymore Manticore. Jake Snow, a.k.a. Jacob Ice Eyes, is the bastard of Last River. Lord Darren of House Rambler, motto, the last hunt is ceaseless. Lady Bobby of House Mitchell. Gandalf the White, Lord of House Sea Morn. Sherry of Skane, last of the Long Night archaeologists and wielder of the untested hypothesis of Valyrian steel trowel with a dragon bone handle. Lady Nicole of House Anime, the small can be powerful, captain of Sweet Camellia. And Adelard the Wanderer, wielder of the Valyrian steel axe, Frostfall. Cool, y'all. Thank you very much for the support. Love to shout out those fun names. And that is all I have for the midroll. So let's get right back to it. Rise of Magic time. So much in this book. This is an incomplete list, but I just want to throw a few out there. And it's interesting to me that we have so much magic in this book without going beyond the wall or hardly being there at all. We technically are at the wall for a minute, or even directly dealing with Daenerys. So that's two major sources of magic plotline, neither of which are featured here, but we still get a ton of magic. Glass candles, dragon binder. Joe, you write down broken horn that Sam brought with him is now in Euron's vicinity. Great point. Jaime's ghost mom, dream mom. I don't even know what to call that, but it's something, and it seems to be quite possibly magical. Marwyn and his takes and conspiracies. There's all sorts. He opens up the doors to lots of things. Aemon's deathbed speeches and prophecies are obviously really big. They change our perception of who the last hero / Azor Ahai, not last hero, but Azor Ahai, Prince of the Promised was. Euron, just in general, there's lots of things associated with him, and even little bits like the Ironborn origins, which also ties into our Bloodlines thing, but that's such a side topic where we won't go there other than to throw out the mention. Kyborg, I mean, I assume there's magic involved in any sort of animation of dead flesh. Then you have things like Cersei and Maggie the Frog, which technically happened a long time ago. But we have examples of that in current time. We have that character Eno One Eye at which brothel was that? I doesn't know.
Happy Port.
Happy Port.
Happy Port.
Yeah, she had the Happy Port.
And of course, that's another in the long line of one-eyed characters with prophetic powers, referencing Odin. We have the further rise of Nymeria the wolf. So geez. That is so much. So I have a couple of questions around these topics. One thing just as another piece of setup, a new tactic I've been using is to consider evidence in reverse. Like if a theory, when considering a theory, if it turns out to be true, what parallels will it create with other things that definitely did happen? For example, if Euron destroys the High Tower, is that going to look like a parallel to taking down the Tower of the Hand or the Tower of Joy? Or some other tower? Lady Gwyn, you mentioned Eastwatch. That's an interesting idea. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, really, it just was thinking of your technique of looking in reverse and then also looking kind of forward into what else could we have this whole theme of towers being taken down. And I thought about Eastwatch, if Eastwatch comes down, if that's the tower in Melisandre's vision, which people have suggested that it could be, that it could be a place of where the wall is breached. It could just be another parallel with these towers coming down, and I'm not sure what that leads to, because honestly, towers coming down is it's a kind of a phallic imagery. So I just don't know where to go with that at this point.
They all have
Euron is one of the people we're talking about,
and a lot of them are burning at the tip.
Right?
Oh, God.
The High Tower at the flame. You even got Stannis has his little watchtower that he's hanging out, and that tip's burning. Glass candles are kind of like little mini towers with the tip is burning, and you don't really want to mess with one of those glass candles. You do not want to touch that. Okay.
NC-17 so fast.
This really went off. We should. Yeah, we're talking about taking towers down. We're talking about erecting towers instead. So let's talk about some variety. Let's take a few questions. Let me get takes from you guys. Some predictions associated with Old Town and the characters there. Let's start with what do you think, and basically, what do we think is going to happen in Old Town? Joe, we'll start with you this time.
Nothing good, probably. There's lots of different theories out there, and they all seem to be along the same theme of something really, really bad happening, both probably in the immediate and the after all, and the overall rather. I'm quite worried, to be honest, about what is going to be going down and how things just seem to be falling into Euron's lap. It's really lucky that Cersei didn't let Paxton Redwine go, and it's really lucky that Sam has brought this horn that might be even more important than his Dragonbinder horn along. And he's not a million miles away from Starfall, and what if he goes to get Dawn or something like that, and he could just get everything, have the full set? We don't know. What I'm obviously worried about mainly is what happens to Sam. I think that's probably the same for all of us. I think his studies will probably be cut short, and he's going to have to get away with Gilly, even if she's there or not. I still don't know. But we don't know how Euron's going to interact with these other multiple factions we've got going on in Old Town. That's just the ones we know about. What's going to happen with Leighton Hightown? What does he know? He's got to know something. It's got to be important in some way. What about the Maesters? How are they actually going to react to this? What is the Alchemist up to? I still have no idea. I still the kind of Charlie Day meme. I really tried to work it out this time, and I've got nowhere at all. All I can think is glass candles. There's something to do with glass candles.
So many moving parts that might connect to each other. Or might not.
I'm just obsessed with the glass candles this time. I'm not even in world, but kind of as George using them as a tool, thinking I kind of need to hurry up here and I need people to be able to talk and communicate a bit faster. I know I'll put in these things that allow people miles away to talk to each other, so maybe I can just get a few of these rivers streaming a little bit quicker and move my story along because it's taking a while. So I'm going to put in this little cheat code. So that's what I'm most excited about for Glass Candles, but also for the story as well.
Yeah. It's almost like he introduced the telephone. He's just like, we've got to never mind about these ravens.
Yeah, it's like ravens just aren't fast enough. They're too slow. Yeah. We need a Valyrian equivalent. We got the North. This is the old gods or the ravens' old school telephone. We need a Valyrian telephone. Yeah. That's pretty good. What do you think about Old Town, Lady Gwyn?
Like Joe, again, I'm gonna just say not good. Nothing good. I haven't given a lot of thought because there's so many ideas and everything kind of links up. But yeah, it's just one of those plot lines that gives me a kind of a sinking feeling. I get that uh-oh feeling.
Right. I mean, they're preparing for Euron as if he's a traditional Ironborn threat. Right. They're like, okay, ships versus ships. Meet them at sea. No, they have no idea what they're in for. Nina, what about you? Do you have kind of a similar feeling, or is this?
No, it's an uh-oh feeling. It's definitely an uh-oh feeling. I think that Euron is planning on using the coming Redwind fleet as a sort of major human sacrifice to work something not very good. I have a feeling that Euron is going to get his hands on that horn. I have a feeling Euron's going to blow that horn. And that's how the wall comes down, possibly from the top of the high tower. Who knows? I have a feeling that Sam, maybe Gilly, Sorella / Alaris, and maybe fake Pate / Jaqen are going to get out of there and get out. But I kind of see Old Town sort of a supernatural nuclear explosion. Nothing good.
Wow. Yeah, it's set up to be. It's too great to survive, right? It's too cool.
You don't even say Old Town and say that it's survived this long.
Yeah, the one of the more ominous lines. It seems so not ominous. It seems just so throwaway, like the Quill and Tankard had stood for 600 years, and it would stand for 600 more.
It'd probably keep going.
It probably won't stand for 6 months more. But
anytime you predict something
for
like
6 hours
anything
more
good is going to happen, you just have to go. No.
Yeah, it's so bad. Yeah. Okay, so here I'm going to put you all on the spot with a couple of simple questions. This doesn't require a lot of explanation. Just you can expand on it if you want, but you can also just say yes or no. Will Euron ride a dragon? Nina.
No. Probably, maybe, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, it is tough. I go back and forth on it. I'll say yes myself. I think I'm going to say yes, but I agree with the not confidence in it.
Euron will not hold on to a dragon. Let me put it that way. Euron will not hold on to a dragon.
Okay, that's
Okay.
that makes sense. That makes sense in terms of a halfway answer because it's sort of a yes, but not a true control the dragon. What about you, Lady Gwyn?
I don't know, but yeah, I would say no, but it's maybe because I don't want him to. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's something I haven't thought about a lot, and whenever I think about it, I kind of like go, "Oh no."
Well, here's
Just
two things that I think argue for it. Maybe to add to help you consider it a little more. Maybe this pushes you one way or the other. One is the TV show having Night King do it, which I think Night King is the parallel to Euron in the book. So that's one thing. The other thing is if Night King since he took down the wall with his dragon as an alternate idea, that could happen instead of using the horn. It would still be the horn, but it would be indirect. The horn gives him the dragon takes down the wall. That's similar. The other one is how much of a parallel he is to Aemond One Eye, including the one blue eye, and maybe dying over the God's Eye in some dragon battle. It would just
that I would get behind,
especially because the dragons in this case might be the color of ice and fire. We have potentially, they were potentially at the case of the God's Eye. Meaning there won't be a red dragon this time, but there was a red dragon. Caraxes was a red dragon, and Vhagar is pale. We don't know the full color, but pale. So that could be ice and fire colors. So that's kind of neat. Anyway, Joe? You didn't answer this one yet. What do you think?
No, I think I'm along the same lines as Lady Gwyn. I don't want him to, so I refuse to consider the possibility. These are my books. George will write them as I see fit. I actually think quite a good thing to see would be a little bit like what Nina says. Not so much he'll ride one, but possibly not even control himself, but just kind of break out of Dany's control. If he sets one wild or sets one insane, if he tries to warg it or something stupid like that. And an insane dragon over King's Landing is going to do as much damage as he would anyway. And he likes chaos, so that might just be his next thing to do. He might get bored after taking down the wall and inviting the whites. I want something else now. I'll set a dragon loose on all of you.
That actually could tie into the way the show worked very vaguely as well, because the show gave us an undead dragon, which I've wondered about if we could get that in the books, either because of the concept of an ice dragon that could be basically what's being referred to there. But yeah, if you have an insane wild dragon that people have to kill, then maybe it gets resurrected as a white GHT dragon.
It would work well if he does that to Viserion, because it's linked to Viserys being half mad anyway, so that would work quite well.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. Nice one. Okay, so another related question is outlook for Gilly at Horn Hill. Joe, you question if she's even going to get to go there.
Yeah, I don't know, because when we reread, I had to reread like 3 times to make sure, but it never actually says that she gets off the boat, off the Cinnamon Wind. So it is, I doubt that George is going to really have time to explore Gilly's another trip to Marine, but it would be quite fun, and it would be a hell of a journey to go all the way from Craster's Keep to Marine. Literally, you can't get any further away, so it would be cool. And she'd get away from Euron, so I'm all for it. And I just like the Cinnamon Wind and its crew, so it would be good for Gilly, but she's probably still there.
There's a lot of pluses, a lot of pros to this this idea.
And it's what I want, so it will happen.
There we go. Yes.
Back to that again. Lady Gwyn, what about you?
Well, I did. Yeah, technically, she hasn't really made it there yet, but assuming she does, and I'm thinking maybe, this Sam's flight from Old Town maybe turns out to be him bringing her to Horn Hill. I thought it was interesting. I was looking at a map as I was thinking about this, because you have to have a map. So I was like, oh, what's happening over there? Where is Horn Hill? It seems far enough removed from water. They make there's a lot made in Ash's chapters about how the Ironborn don't go far from the sea. And I don't think that's going to change much with Euron, just simply because they're in boats. They're going to be coastal. They're going to be, going far up the Mander, potentially. So if you look at the map, almost every single major castle in the Reach is accessible by river or is on the coast, except for Horn Hill. So possibly that's maybe one of the few places where they would be safe.
The most landlocked of seats.
Yep.
Yes.
So
okay.
that gave me hope.
Nina, what about you? What do you think for Gilly and Horn Hill and all that?
I did. It's funny. I was actually just pulling up the map on my World of Winds and Fire after looking at this. But no, I do think I don't know that Sam will take Gilly to Horn Hill before everything happens at Old Town, just because I feel like that would be a lot of back and forth. Like he took her to Horn Hill, and then he went back, and then he went back to Horn Hill.
That's an important thing.
Yeah. So I feel like for narrative simplicity, I think Gilly might get off. Sam might, plot reason be like, oh, he's trying to find someone to go to Horn Hill, but then get Sam, Gilly, Sorella, and again maybe Pate. Go to Horn Hill, maybe because after everything happens, Sam's like, oh, I gotta warn my mom and sisters that hey, there's a madman who has just exploded a city. Can you maybe get out of here? You're not safe. So I'm thinking that they go to Horn Hill then, rather than go to Horn Hill prior.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's very reasonable. There's a lot of logic behind that take. Okay, so let's move on. Another question. I actually have this question farther down in the document, but since we're talking about Euron and stuff, this is the time to mention it. This is another going forward question. Only a simple answer is required. You can feel free to expand, though. Will Euron and Cersei ally and/or have a relationship not as portrayed in the show, but as suggested by the show? Of course, it won't be like the show, but it might be. The show may have done its own version of that because George told them that it was going to happen in the books. I'll give a little setup for this. Euron has not attacked the West, which is interesting. It leaves that open. He certainly has a personality similar to Cersei in some ways, in that they want to be able to do whatever they want. They want to be able to, they want no restrictions. They want absolute power, and they want people to follow them. And of course, there's Euron, maybe if he wants this is getting a little farther off, but if Euron wants to have like a king's blooded child, Cersei would be a candidate for that if he's unable to get Daenerys. She might be like the next best thing if he can't get her. I don't know. So, but mostly it's the suggestion from the TV show and these thematic things that align. I was more on the lookout for it this time through because I hadn't really considered it last time. So, let's see. Nina, we'll start with you this time because you were last time. We'll do first in, last time. What do you think? Euron and Cersei or no?
No, and the reason I say this is because I don't think Cersei has anything that Euron wants.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Euron doesn't just want to be king. Euron wants to be a god king in the manner of like Valyria, but even more evil. So Cersei can't give him that. Daenerys with dragons can give him that. Cersei can give him nothing. So I think he would think of her as maybe amusing, but basically not very interesting in terms of taking.
Maybe more of just one of his concubines at most, or something like that. Not that it would go that way, but that's how he would see her. Okay.
But frankly, I don't even think they're going to interact.
Okay, cool. Joe, what about you?
Yeah, I think Nina got it right there. I don't think of all the people Euron can choose, I don't know why you would choose the one seemingly on the downturn and who's just lost everything. She's at the bottom of the pile.
You're right. That explains why she might want to hook up with him, but the other end is like, well, why would he want to?
Well, actually, I think the flip side is we've seen all this stuff about how Cersei does not want to share her power, and she does especially not want to share it with a man again. She's already done that once before, and she did not enjoy it. So unless there's really... she's kind of in the mood, well, I have literally no other choice, it's this or nothing, then maybe. Yeah. But, no, I don't think so. Anyway, I don't want to see it.
The show did portray it in the way you're describing, which is that Cersei tried to keep Euron as a subordinate, and he was trying to push to be her equal with the marriage. It was like, let's get married. But you're right that is a good, like, she wouldn't necessarily accept anything other than that, if at all. So that's a strong point. Lady Gwyn, let's hear from you on this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of agreeing there, although God knows she's going to need allies, so she's not going to have any left. Basically, obviously all the other regions have sort of escaped her control, so she's left with the Crown Lands and the Westerlands, although really I don't know much about the Westerlands, and neither does she. But
she doesn't live there very much.
She hasn't lived there for a very long time. So, but I assume she feels like she can fall back on that. The Crown Lands are just slipping through her grasp. As Dance goes on and as Winds opens, she's lost Stokeworth, and she's probably going to lose Rosby, and these are some of the biggest houses other than the ones that are already the Lords of the Narrow Sea, who are still mostly with Stannis. So I mean, I could see her wanting to be Euron's ally, but not equal. I could see him being intrigued by her if she blows something up in a giant way like he did. He might be like, but and there's nothing to stop Euron really from wanting another wife. I mean, he's not the kind of guy to stand on ceremony and be like, oh no, I'm saving myself for Daenerys. I mean, I could see him making a play for it if he thought it would bring him something, but I don't see what it would really bring either one of them.
It's a good point,
narratively speaking.
He might be most interested in Qyburn if he gets to Cersei. I'll marry you if I can talk to Qyburn and learn how you do this Kyborg thing. Sure.
I came for the boom boom explosion, and I stayed for your dark magic.
Yes, I want necromancy on my team too. Yeah, he would want some like a squadron of Robert Strongs there. What is dead can never die, but rises higher to try. It's right there. It's right there in their religion.
But a lot of these.
And they're silent as well. They can go and serve on the silence.
They're made for him. I swear. Yeah. So that is those are strong takes there. Also, one other thing to add to this. One other reason I considered this idea is that I don't think any of us anyway, think that Cersei's going to die when Aegon comes. Her death will come later. It's not that Aegon's. These two things won't necessarily coincide. She'll probably get away from King's Landing, and that's one of the reasons.
I don't know about that.
Okay. You think she won't get away from King's Landing? Okay, that's fair. I shouldn't speak for other people.
I have a name. I don't have a lot of strong feelings on where it happens, but I could see it all kind of happening in one sort of super dramatic moment.
The stuff in Fire and Blood about this whole Queen of the West thing is where some of this comes from in my mind, is that we have this notion of a queen sitting there waiting for the Eastern King to come get her, like when Maegor took the crown and Rhaena was like, well, he's going to come for me eventually, and he never did. And so, I don't know. Anyway, let's move on from that, though. That's I think we've covered that pretty well. A little bit less magical oriented. Let's talk a bit about Aftermath and Broken Men, but still magic oriented, because in the Riverlands we have things like the wolves, and winter itself is, well, it's not unmagical in Westeros. It's not fully magical either. So this is a hugely powerful theme that ties into the magical stuff as well as the character stuff. It's one of the most important aspects of the book. Not just Broken Men, but the reign of contempt. There's contempt everywhere for human life, for things like honor, things like guest right, things like all sorts of traditions are gone. We have a lot of silence, not just from Euron, the Quiet Isle, things like that. Singers have a horrible time in this book. It's a Song of Ice and Fire, and the song theme is strong throughout all the books. Here, it takes the songs in this book would all be in a minor key. Let's put it that way. They're very sad and such. And of course, on top of all that, we have revenge. The revenge of the River Lords, the revenge of the Brotherhood, the revenge of perhaps winter itself is a form of nature's revenge, and that may be more literal than it seems if it turns out that the seasons are wonky because of the children and the others, going after humanity even as they're losing the war, something along those lines. I don't know exactly, but thematically that's pretty powerful. So let's go to Lady Gwyn first. Let's talk about Broken Men and what the Riverlands will look like in the Winds of Winter. Anything you have to say about this bag of topics?
Yes, it is a big bag too.
It is a large bag.
So I think it's going to be major. I once called the Riverlands in the Winds of Winter a shitstorm of Stark Tully vengeance, and I still think that's pretty accurate. We're thematically we'll continue to see what the price of war is with Broken Men. That theme isn't going anywhere, and vengeance. It's the innocents suffer most when the High Lords play their games of Thrones. It is we're going to continue to see what the consequences of vengeance are. So
yeah, Not good.
Shitstorms.
It's kind of like Old Town. Not good. Not good.
Not good. Capital N, capital G. Not good.
Nina, what about you? What do you think about the Riverlands?
Well, I was just watching The Simpsons, and I was watching Skinner's Sense of Snow, and there's a part in that episode where Lisa says, "No, don't dig out. There's probably rescue teams digging us right now." And it cuts to above the school, which is covered in snow, and there are two wolves standing there, and the one says to the other in subtitles, "I smell human meat," and the other wolf says, "I smell human meat also," and they just start digging through the snow. And I felt like that, which I think I even texted you because I thought that was just so funny. And it's such a perfect microcosm of what I imagine happening in the Riverlands in the Winds of Winter, because winter is here, and also, you know, the Riverlands was hit particularly hard by the War of the Five Kings, which means that there is not as much or any food saved. So there is going to be lots of famine. There's going to be lots of snow. There are lots of wolves out. There's lots of people that are going to die.
Yeah, that's true. Joe, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I think shitstorm's probably the way to put it, but a snowy shitstorm, it's all coming. You've got this big boiling pot of like half a dozen different factions, like we've said, the Riverrun garrison, and the wolves, and the blackfishes out there, and the Holy Hundred, and those people, Strongbow, those people. And as Nina just said, there's no food for any of them. It's going to be less because it's probably going to be a winter like they've never seen before. I think it's going to end up as we've seen the North in Dance, like in Stannis' March, and they're obviously not going to be able to cope with that at all. Not only that, but they're just screwed. The Riverlands are always screwed because of where they are. And there's this real encroaching feeling because you've got the shadow coming from the north. Now you've got Euron coming from the south. There's dragons coming in from the east. So not only do you have no food and for enough people, you're probably going to have loads of refugees kind of swarming up from the Reach or maybe out of King's Landing. You don't know. Or even people trying to get out of the north. It's going to all be really, really bad. Like you say, most like Old Town, it's just going to be not good for anyone. And I think we're going to see all these things, like Lady Gwyn said, all these themes that we've already thought are pretty bad get worse and just prove how badly timed that war actually was. We've not even seen the true consequences of it yet.
I'd say that's a really good thing. I was going to bring up the same thing, and you did it. So that's really well done, Joe. You brought up the theme of it can always get worse, which is something we harped on a lot during Valar. Rereadis. Euron is a great example of how we've seen Ironborn leaders before that get ambitious and start blowing stuff up, but Euron is worse than any of them. And Cersei, it can always get worse with Cersei. And there's so many examples. You're right. Like the Riverlands, we saw it go through hell in Game, Clash, and Storm. And now there's all this evidence that it will get worse. Are you kidding me? No, he's not kidding us. He's not at all. It is very much written in snow. I would say stone. Snow works better here. So we've got a decent bit of questions built up from y'all. Let's pivot to those to make sure we can get them all in. First off, a related question to what we just discussed from No F in Aegon. Do we think the Brotherhood Without Banners took Maribald's food stores, and will we see him again, / will he have to head back to the Quiet Isle if that's indeed what happened? Apparently this was something you guys touched on a little bit on your stream yesterday with Radio Westeros and with Joe Buckley as a guest. So folks, definitely check that out. There's more Stoneheart chat there. I'm sure there's some stuff that we didn't cover here that, if not a lot of stuff. So I would definitely recommend that. So let's start, Joe. Let's start with you on this question.
Yeah, I was trying not to repeat myself too much with all this Stoneheart Riverlands talk. For the question specifically, I'm not sure. I think Maribald has probably just gone on his way, like I said. I don't think there's no reason for them to really keep him out of. He's got nothing to do with the Red Wedding or what the Stoneheart's trying to accomplish. Yeah, and I think he's just going to be let off. Now, will we see him again? I probably hope not, because if we do, I just worry about Dog. I don't want a reality where we meet Maribald and Dog's been eaten or something like that. I'm not going to be able to handle it. So
that's a good point.
I'm hoping he's just been allowed to go into the sunset, and we can just pretend everything's fine for Maribald, because I don't want any
they're safer if they don't show up, aren't they?
Yeah. Just get out of the story.
Get out now. Nina, what do you think about he had all that food he was going to distribute? Did you think they just took it from him, even though maybe he was going to distribute to the same places anyway? Or
No, I don't see, and this is more of a broader answer about the Brotherhood without banners. Currently, I don't see them as a constructive force. I see them as a destructive force. So I don't think they're so much focused as they were in Storm on redistributing that. So I think what they say to Brienne is true. They sort of let him go on his way. So I'm thinking that may be the last we see of Maribald. He sort of served his thematic purpose, and certainly I don't want to see anything bad happen to him in the other books.
And Lady Gwyn, did we hear from you on this? I don't think so.
Oh, there he is.
Timing.
Oh, good timing. So the you dropped out and came back. The question is about Maribald's food stores and the Brotherhood. Did the Brotherhood take his food stores, and will we see him again? That's for you, Lady Gwyn. Oh, she's not there again?
She's here. I'm just trying to give her 1 second.
Oh, okay.
I don't think she can hear you.
There we go.
Oh, there she is. Okay.
There we go.
Power cut.
Oh. Did you hear the question?
Nope.
Okay, so the question is, did we think the Brotherhood took Maribald's food stores when they captured him? We know he was let go, but did they keep his
why
food?
do I keep losing my... It's interesting. My volume keeps going out.
Oh. Okay, well,
go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, move on, because I'm still struggling with some
okay, yeah, we'll move
technical
on.
Retrieval of
We've got another good question here. This one's from Maura Lee. How will Stoneheart react to Jon presumably being named a king a la Robb's will? And something I'd never considered in light of all this is the fact that she has Robb's crown in her possession. And so if Jon ascends to the the kingdom of the North, either because of Robb's will or other means, probably Robb's will, then, well, she has the crown. Is that going to matter? Is the crown kind of irrelevant? Joe, looks like you have a lot of notes on this. Apparently, this is something you guys didn't discuss yesterday, so I'm glad we're not doing overlap. Or you didn't have time for it. Either way, there's so many things to discuss. That's not a surprise. How could you? So you could talk for 8 hours about Stoneheart and and still not repeat anything. So yeah, take it away, Joe.
I was pretty glad, because this is something I've become obsessed with just in the past week while I was getting ready for the live stream of Radio Westeros. I was saying yesterday, I'd always really thought that Stoneheart wouldn't leave the Riverlands. She's too thematically tied, but then the more I thought about it, I'm now convinced she will. Lady Gwyn has convinced me. And there's just the connection, the possibility of connections between Catelyn or Stoneheart with Jon and how she's going to react to him is just, it's really, again, Charlie Dane meme, it's just really filling my mind. We've guessed about maybe she's thinking Jon is going to be coming for Rickon and she feels the need to protect him, or she hears about Arya. It really depends on timing. You can't really guess that part. But in general, I just think the relationship between Catelyn and Jon is going to be super important for wins, especially because near the end of Storm, when Jon's considering Winterfell and whether he should take Stannis' offer, he has that kind of, her face kind of comes up in front of him, and there's a lot of imagery about blue eyes and cold lips and like as if she's dead. So it's just, there seems to be some really strong connection between them. But what I've been thinking about is there's something about this whole sword without a hilt idea that comes strong, that obviously Jon heard first of all, and he thinks about again in Dance. Stoneheart is a product of some kind of magic or higher power. We know that, but is it a power we should actually have access to? Should Beric be allowed to go around giving it to whoever he likes? Because honestly, everyone really lucked out that it happened to Beric first, because he was a really good guy and he used the opportunity to help people.
That's true.
Catelyn is not doing the same, and there's a really good chance that Jon won't either. And he's the one, like I say, most closely tied to the sword without a hilt quote. But whenever I think of that quote, I think of Catelyn right back at the beginning when she was willing to grasp a blade without access to a hilt in Game of Thrones to defend Bran. So that one just won't leave my mind at the moment.
That's a really good one.
I've spoken a lot before about how all the Starks are probably going to be on some scale kind of dark, dodgy elements to them, even if they overall deliver something good to the world. I think we agree, like they're all kind of going down a darkish path. They've got that capacity anyway. I think Stoneheart and Jon are going to be in the driver's seat for that theme. I think George is going to want to leave this series with us arguing still over who is good and bad, and what Jon did at the end, does that make him a villain? What about Stoneheart? he loves writing about the human heart in conflict, but I think he likes creating us to have that same conflict and that same argument. He's going to want to leave that because he's such a forerunner and create this fandom's just different than all the others, and that we have all these theories that we've been talking about for so long. I think he wants to continue that after the series is done as well.
Yeah, it may have been something he set out to do in the first place, and then realized that it was working and did it even more. Or not, I don't know. Lady Gwyn, yeah, you also seemed to have an interesting take here.
Yeah, I think. I'm glad this came up again because we didn't really fully cover it yesterday, but we did touch on it a little bit. Maybe we just kind of glanced off of it, but we did have somebody ask us a question afterwards, and we don't usually get a chance to answer those questions after the fact like this. So the question, it was, why would she want to carry out Robb's wishes or legacy, since Catelyn has already disagreed with Robb's wishes, with this thing of his will and naming Jon his successor. And my answer to that is Stoneheart is most motivated by wanting her son back. Lem says she wants her son alive, and that's everything about him. I think she wants Robb, including his wishes, what he wanted, his succession. Anything that she can get back that is Robb or that reminds her of Robb will, I think, somehow be precious to her. So if she has that spark of sort of reason or humanity left in her, I could definitely see her clinging to that as a memory of Robb.
Right on.
Is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that like the last matter of state they talk about before they get to the twins as well?
Yes.
Is that like the last thing they do?
That and the fact that he's packing her off, to be in retirement after
the Seaguard or whatever,
sending her to Seaguard. Yeah. So and she knows obviously his battle plans as far as what he's going to do right directly after the wedding. But in terms of his plans for his for what he wanted for his realm, that's the last thing she knows. So.
And Nina, what about you? Let's hear from you on this one. Great topic.
Yeah, I tend to see Stoneheart, like I said a minute ago, Stoneheart I feel like is more of a destructive force than a constructive force, and she really seems more like a nemesis figure, someone who is there to kill and to cause death as a result of this sort of gross injustice of the Red Wedding. So to that extent, I don't really see her in a sort of political context, in a sort of making kings or making crowns sort of thing. I think that her business is mostly to see that vengeance for the Red Wedding is executed. So once that's sort of completed in whatever form that takes in the Winds of Winter, I think her story is pretty much done. Okay. Doesn't mean that members of the Brotherhood without banners won't meet up with Jon. I certainly think someone like a Thoros or a Harwin could turn it around and be ultimately beneficial. But I don't think Stoneheart really is connected with that.
Well, let me stick with you then for this related question, also from Morley. Will it affect her at all, or if so, in what way, if she finds out that Jon is not the son of Ned, meaning she would retroactively learn what Ned had done and realize that this lie and this keeping this kid around was to keep him alive. And also it would mean that Ned didn't cheat on her, which is not a huge deal, considering she'd seemed to already make her peace with that, but it is relevant. Do you think that you think this is maybe not going to even happen? Or
yeah, I don't see it particularly happening, and even if it did, I'm not sure to what extent Stoneheart remembers that was a conflict. Catelyn, that was a conflict.
Yeah, maybe not.
I'm not sure how much, if you're dead for 3 days, how much do you remember of your former life? How much do you actually remember of what mattered to you? It mattered to Catelyn. Would it matter to Stoneheart? Again, I feel like their stories are so separate that it's not so much a factor for her anymore.
Related to that as well, if anyone wants to weigh in on her finding out about Rickon / Bran or even Arya being alive, if that changes the picture for her. But mostly, I'm curious about this Jon answer as well. But if you think it's not even going to happen, that would be a good alternate question. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to try and be careful and not repeat myself too much, because we did talk a lot about how much of Catelyn remains in Stoneheart, and I'm kind of on the opposition to Nina. I think it is still quite a lot of Catelyn. For this specific question, I think if we were really being hopeful, we'd want to see Stoneheart / Catelyn have some kind of admitting she was wrong to treat Jon that way, even without this information. She should kind of feel bad about it anyway, because whether this is true or not, she still shouldn't have been like that to Jon. That's probably asking far, far too much for that kind of learning at this point. But we did talk about her coming back opens up these avenues of possibilities, like you say, finding out if Bran and Rickon are alive or meeting Arya. This would definitely be included, but it's probably quite far down the scale. In terms of just interacting with Jon, I think we're probably past the idea of Stoneheart coming north and giving the kiss of life to him. It's just not really.
I agree.
The timelines and the travel don't really meet up. But I'd still like it if she did, because it would make Jon kissed by fire, as Ygritte was. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I guess you say here, Mel could maybe that still might be kissed by fire if Mel does it.
Yeah.
Lady Gwyn, what do you think? Yeah, without, I don't want to ask you to repeat anything you said yesterday, but if anything you can add to this would be great.
Yeah, well, I mean, I want to say that I'm with Joe. I think there's a lot more of Catelyn residing in Stoneheart than is at first obvious. I mean, she's definitely got memories. She remembers her children and her vows, the vows made to Jaime and Brienne. That's a while ago. I mean, obviously she remembers the Red Wedding and what the phrase and the Boltons and all that stuff that happened right at the end of her life. But there are things from her past that she clearly does remember, and Rob's crown means something to her. So I guess it really comes down to just how much reason and humanity is left in her. I suspect that it is rather more than is at first obvious. If it's enough, then that news might matter to her. But if it's not enough, it's probably not going to move the needle too much.
She might still have a soft spot in there, even despite her revenant bearing. But she's certainly, I can't disagree with the part that she's definitely about killing. That is, I think that's true. It might just be, there might be a little more to it. Yeah.
It definitely comes first. Maybe we'll do something after, but I'm definitely
revenge is...
We're definitely, that's what was first, like that last thing that was in her mind when she was killed. That's obviously, the horror and the need to, get vengeance, but she's definitely got, there's stuff deep down that
cool.
Maybe you come out. Yeah.
Well, that's good, because I like it's good when obviously there's confidence when we all agree on something, but when we have different takes, then that's fun too, because it just makes the whole thing more mysterious. It makes it a little harder to settle. So we have more mystery coming. Here's a somewhat related question from Missy's Castle Dreams. She says, I've been thinking a lot about Jon /Beric /Stoneheart lately. Is there any way that Jon could not be a Fire White? And the reason she brings that up is it's different. The whole concept of the magic is different if we have some sort of second life in Ghost, and then he comes back and he's got skin changing powers and possibly dragon blood and just these other magical aspects that are outside the normal scope of what we've learned about both being a white or some sort of undead being, and in general. Like, Jon has got different important qualities that might change, and she also mentions that Robin Hobb as an influence, and there's a character called Fitz in the Farseer series who goes into his wolf and then dies and then goes back to his body. So that could be an influence, and I'm not familiar with that series, but it does sound similar, at least conceptually. So does anyone have a take on this? This is a tough question because the whole mechanics of fire whitedom is tricky in the first place, but I definitely agree on the surface that not fully understanding what the terms mean, Jon will be unlike past examples because of the potential for other magic, especially the skin changing. Does Joe, do you have anything to add to this, or does this?
I think it's I think firstly, Stoneheart, again, she's going to serve some kind of purpose of letting us know something about how this works or what the cost is or something like that. I think there's got to be a reason that it's Catelyn and Jon, considering their relationship. But for this specific part of Jon coming back, well, like you say, it's not the same. He has this other element, whether it's that he was in Ghost or whether it's just his walking ability. He's not going to be the same as everyone else. So does that make him worse? Is he going to come back even wilder or more powerful or something like that? I think in the end, it's another aspect of he's the Song of Ice and Fire. He's going to have this ice concept of living in ghosts, so the Stark blood in him, and he's going to be reawakened by fire. So it's just another layer of that kind of duality in him, I think.
Yeah, well said. Nina, do you have a take on this?
She's gone.
Oh, she's gone.
It's
Okay.
fine.
I think she's gone.
Okay, yeah, Nina had to leave. We did learn that she might have to go at 5. Apparently that was the case. So bye, Nina. Check out goodqueenally at tumblr.com. That's her blog, and she has a lot of great takes over there. A lot of them have popped up in our episodes, and we'll continue to do so. So let's move on now. We have just a few more questions, so we won't be lingering too long without her, but we definitely have a few more to get to. So Lady Gwyn, what do you think about this question?
Yeah, definitely think that John's going into Ghost, and I'm familiar with the Farseer series, but I have read some. I've never read to this part, so that's news to me. I find that very interesting. I do know that George and Robin are friends, and I find that very interesting. And we know he loves to take influence from his friends, so like this, he still eats, drinks, and has children, which would solve that eternal question about Jon and what he's capable of after coming back.
It sure does. It sure does make the Lord's kiss look different in retrospect. Like, oh, is that the only thing he can do?
Maybe there's still hope. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the blood does pool in the extremities, so I don't know.
Tower talk.
More of this.
Shea says, what if he just always has an erection? Well, according to Viagra commercials that I've seen, if your erection persists longer than 2 hours, please call a doctor.
You should definitely call your physician.
Yeah, I don't know who you call if you're an undead being.
Your undead physician?
There's no masons at the wall. He's going to be in trouble. There's none left.
I guess you call Qyburn?
Need a glass candle. This is going to be a quick call. We can't wait for Ravens.
You just call 8QYBURN. The Qyburn hotline. Don't worry, we're not tracking your calls. So here's a question from Agnieszka Janika Struska. A Feast for Crows in Polish. Will you try to read it? She wrote it here on Uksa Diaron.
I'll say.
Uksa Dlaron? Yeah, okay.
Uksta Dlaron?
What do you think, Joe?
I will not attempt because people will come for me with pitchforks.
Okay, well, I hope we were at least in the ballpark. And ballparks are very large, so that gives us a lot of
Yes, that's right. It could be I was in right field, you were in left field, we're still in the ballpark.
Yes. No, we were in the parking lot. Damn, we were close. From Julie McCausland. I keep wondering if the repeated bird imagery surrounding Sansa is hinting that her warg abilities will become stronger. She wonders maybe if in a moment of desperation there's a little bit of something, or maybe if I could add to her question, I would suggest maybe like a sensitivity, a feeling, like a sensitivity to dreaming, something like that. Maybe not power, but like a feel, or because she definitely there's a lot of this association with the North and cold that comes up in her chapters in the Vale, where it makes her feel more at home. And of course, there's the notion here that Julie mentions that Varys and his little birds, and Arya uses the cat from Bravos, and she gets called Little Bird. And yeah, what do you think, Lady Gwyn? You've got some notes here.
Yeah, I just think that Little Bird is almost certainly a hint at how her warging abilities are going to be used now. I mean, we know she still has them. She has the dream at Peter Baelish's castle. I don't know if we call it a castle, but his holding that through the eyes of the old dog there. So it's obvious, and George has said they're all wargs, but we haven't really seen, unlike Arya and Bran and obviously Jon, we haven't really seen much of that from her. But I think Little Bird is this kind of hint, and I think that's just a lovely connection with Bran and ravens. They're both out there flying around in birds. I would love to see that.
Little Bird is an awfully specific phrase, isn't it? Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
George is just like, you know what? I just have to use that again. I have no other way to describe this. I'm forced to use the phrase little birds to describe two different things, but they're not connected. No, not at all. But, I mean, they might not be. But what do you think, Joe?
Yeah, this is a great catch. It's definitely not something I had caught before. It flew over my head, I guess you could say. Hey.
Nice.
But yeah, I guess it does make a lot of sense because we've talked a lot about Sansa remembering her starkness and that always coming through. And I've always just been thinking that in terms of kind of familial concept. But yeah, why wouldn't it extend to her walking powers as well? You can say that she can't refine them. Maybe she can never control them because of Lady's death, but they would still be present. We've talked about bloodlines already and blood magic, so I guess that ability hasn't gone anywhere specifically. So yeah, maybe it will turn up, and that would definitely be cool if she can start actually doing what kind of Peter Baelish and Varys joke about being able to do, of having eyes and ears everywhere. If you can actually do that, that would be pretty cool.
That would be a real thing to be like. A put down for her to deliver to him. Yeah. That's a great call. Yeah, I like the idea. I honestly haven't considered it a lot because I think back to George saying, yeah, she lost her wolf, but that's a sign of it not developing the way it would with the other. She doesn't have this constant conduit to kind of work through, but that doesn't mean the power isn't there, that the seed doesn't exist, the receptor, the gene, whatever you want to call it. So Agnieszka says that we did a decent job there, but that Uxta is like Uchta, which she gives us an A for being brave. Not you, Joe, though. No A for you.
I'll do it in West Country next time. I'll say Feast of Crows in West Country. None of you will be able to understand it.
I look forward to that. Okay, I think we got one or two more questions, and then we'll do a little wrap up. Let's see. Here's one. Oh, yeah. So from Jenny C., Arianne speaks of several servants, including Hota, as having come to Dorne with her mother. Does that mean they may be more loyal to Arianne than Doran? That's an interesting idea. Never thought about that. Certainly when we consider people turning on Doran, which we've done, there's obviously a lot of reasons to think about people turning on Doran. I never thought about servants. And of course, what's interesting as a side question is Areo Hota. Not that I think he will turn on Doran. No, that is completely off the realm of possibility, in my opinion. However, it is interesting that Areo is loyal to Doran when he was brought over by Milario, his wife, who there is now estranged. So I'd love to hear y'all's takes both on this, just on this general topic around servants and whether Doran can trust them, and Hota and Milario, if you have anything to add on that. So start with you, Joe, since looks like you have some things written here.
Yeah, it's pretty much what you just said there. Why has this kind of why has he basically been transferred who he's employed by? It seems like he was we don't know like however the term is, but sworn to Milario or connected to or whatever, and it seems to have been transferred to Doran. Is that because Milario told him to do that? Is there something else going on? And Doran does specifically have this memory of when he went to meet Milario, and Arya was obviously on the other side. So it seems like it's brought up, but no explanation is given. So I just wonder if that's going to ever be given to us. I don't think it really makes that big of a difference because, like you said, I don't think he's going to turn on Doran anyway. But it would be very interesting to find out. And I wonder maybe if that's a sign George once planned for Milario to somehow become involved, but even if it's off stage in some way, because Quentin, before he dies, thinks about, I should really go and see her. Maybe she was supposed to have some reaction to his death and kind of bring in, because that's one area of the map we haven't been to, like Norvos and Upper Essos. So maybe she was going to be the representative from that area of the world, but I'd be surprised if we still have space for that, but who knows, we're always guessing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, it's interesting to consider. What do you think, Lady Gwyn?
Yeah, I think there's always, when things like that are mentioned, you always have to wonder if it could mean something down the line. These servants, they're not Dornish. Is that mentioned for a reason? I guess I don't think George writes much for no reason. I do get the feeling that Areo is pretty fully loyal to Doran. In fact, Doran over Arianne. I mean, he's following all of Doran's orders, and he thinks of her as his little princess, but thinks that she's been making mistakes. So I don't think that he's one that's ever gonna kind of jump ship, but we don't know that much about these other people. So.
That's true. Okay. All right. Well, one thing I'm going to do here, I encourage my guests and you all in the chat to speak up if I miss one. But last few times we've read who the dead characters were, but it's become trickier because a lot of times we learn a character died, but they actually died during the timeline of the previous book. So I'm going to do locations this time because something I think is I'm going to push back against something that the Feast for Crows sometimes seems like a book that is narrow in its focus. Even because it zooms in more on characters, but really the world building in this book is quite expansive, and we cover a huge number of locations in this book, and I think that's something people maybe don't realize unless you sit down and look at it. So let's have a fun little list, then we'll have our outro from our guests to see what they're up to next, and then we'll call it a day. So Crown Lands, we got King's Landing, got the Sept of Baelor is a big feature, of course the Red Keep as always, Crackclaw Point and the Whispers, that was new entirely, Duskendale. We also get indirectly part of the story. Dragonstone, Stokeworth, and Rosby are all big parts of Cersei's arc. Dragonstone, Loras going there. Stokeworth with the Stokeworth with the whole business with Bronn and Felice and Lollies. Then Rosby, the Rosby inheritance, and Giles Rosby and all that. In the Riverlands, we have a huge number of locations: Maidenpool, Saltpants, the Quiet Isle, Harrenhal, Castle Derry, Riverrun, the Inn at the Crossroads, not to mention micro spots like the Woads Little Castle, if you can call it that, the Sow's Horn Tower House, wherever they wander. I mean, there's lots of just walking down the road, which isn't a specific location. The Brotherhood's Caves, we don't know where that is exactly, but because they've got several different caves. They've got their summer condo cave and their winter, getaway caves and their upscale caves. Yes. Dorne, we get the Water Gardens, Sunspear and the Shadow City, Shandystone. Lots of other locations mentioned like Ironwood, High Hermitage, Hellholt, Gaston Grey. These are places that are important that we may never go to. Well, High Hermitage we probably will, but I mean, Ironwood, that's a hugely important location, for example. Hellholt is the home of the Ullers. The Reach, of course, we get some of our only Reach time ever, really. Old Town, the Shield Islands, indirectly. The Arbor is hugely important, even though we don't go there. Also, Brightwater Keep, the Florence seat, and Long Table, which is the seat of the Merryweathers. On the Iron Islands, of course, we have Old Wick, Pike, and 10 Towers, and discussion of other houses there. The Vale, same thing. Nearly all the important houses get mentioned. Several representatives show up. We get the Eyrie and the Gates of the Moon specifically. Of course, we get a minute at the Wall. We do get the Wall, technically, in this book. Not much of it. And we get Bravos. Lots of Bravos. I mean, we get a ton of Bravos. Arya literally goes all over town. I mean, that's like her job, to get to know the place. And so we do as well. Well, even though the Stormlands in the north aren't really in the book, they come up too. And not a lot, including Moat Cailin. Also the Summer Isles. We don't go there, but of course, Sam, we learn a lot about their culture. So that is a lot of locations, and I probably forgot a few. Anything that I definitely forgot that you guys noticed there, or guess not?
I think so.
Cool.
No, I was going to say Blackwood Hall, but that's
Jaime, that's the one.
The Dragon. So,
yeah. I'm sure the twins is mentioned. I didn't mention that, but they didn't. It doesn't show up directly.
Yeah,
but,
some other, what do you call it? The Hagsmire and
good point.
The Neck is mentioned, which brings to mind, Howland Reed. So.
That's true. And of course, I guess technically Norvos was mentioned too. Not super important, but hey, we got it.
Some really go past. I can't remember what it's called, but it's the seat of House Castaigne, don't they? Just on the corner, going into the
Three Towers,
Whispering Towers. Yes, I knew it was something towers.
Nice, good call. We were talking about tower. I guess those three are coming down too. Do they have burning tips? I wonder. By the way, you gave me a mashup idea earlier for a costume, Joe, when you were talking about Charlie Day. It's like Charlie Dane, right? We got to have Charlie Kelly mashed up with Arthur Dane, the Sword of the Morning Wood. I don't know. What do we call Sword of the Day Man. Yeah, we'll have to think about that more.
Sword of the Day Man. Oh my God,
this is pretty good. There's some fertile ground right here.
I am the sword of the. I am of the night. I don't know. You could, there's something in there.
Fighter of the Dark Star. Brandon Winslow says, I didn't hear Harrenhal. I thought I said Harrenhal, but I might have skipped it. But definitely we went to Harrenhal. Yes, Harrenhal was important. Jamie hates this place. Oh, no, I didn't. I think I have it on the list, but I might have skipped it. Anyway, very important, no doubt. Leah Rubenfeld says Little Bird equals Tattletale. She's going to be the one to make Jon's secret public after Ned worked so hard to keep it. That is what happened on the show. I can't say it's impossible or even really speak against it in the books. Really, I just don't know. That it seems like it's entirely possible. You guys have a take on that? I never considered that.
I guess it makes sense in she was the secret revealer about Ned in the first place. So, maybe she makes up for that. Yeah. Reading it about Jon.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I could see that for sure. And it looks like one last question snuck in here from Magnum Mater 2. It never braced me before. Sansa has red hairs, her grandma is a Went, and might inherit the witch stronghold of Harrenhal. If she gets rid of her dad, Peter, ... ellipsis. And then Shay adds, there's also this quote reminiscent of the Went bat. She changed into a wolf with big leather wings like a bat and flew out a tower window. Yeah, another tower. Yeah, she didn't want. She had to get out of there. The tip was burning. So that is very much speaking to her ancestry. Changed into a wolf, which is her Stark heritage. Big leather wings like a bat. That's her Went heritage. That's really good. The witch queen of Harrenhal business with Alice Rivers and Dance with the Dragons. That's an interesting crossover. I'm gonna have to think about that one more. Nothing jumps out at me, but it bears more consideration, because that's a good point. She does have that connection. She's the only one that's come up with, like, obviously all the Starks have that heritage. They all have that Went heritage, but Sansa's the one that this quote happens, the one that it's referred to, and she's the one associated with Littlefinger too. So, and who is technically the Lord of it. Good call. Oh, and Shay says also a little bird, like a bat, is kind of like a little bird.
Yeah,
in that
I think context. Actually in that, I think Sandor Clegane actually when that quote is told, it's told to them at the crossroads, and he actually says, "Oh, so the little bird flew away."
Oh yeah, that's right. When and they laugh and they're like, "What's up?" And he's like, "If I wanted you to know, I'd tell you." Yeah, that's right. That's really good. Good point. Very good. Cool. Okay, I think that does it, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Thank you very much to my guests. Again, I'll repeat, since Nina had to leave a little early, check her out at goodqueenalley.tumblr.com, and she'll be back to add her thoughts for our Dance of Dragons read-through when we get that started in a few weeks. Lady Gwyn, what is up in the near future for Radio Westeros, and anything else you want to plug, please do.
Lord, a lot.
Good. Well, that's a great start. That's what we like to hear.
So we've doing our Winds of Winter primer series, and the next regular episode of that is actually coming out soon. The patron rollout starts tomorrow, and that's an episode all about Cersei and King's Landing. So if I talked a lot about Cersei and seemed like I was really more focused on her, that's because that's where my head has been for a couple of weeks. But so there's that, and we've been doing our live streams. We have a live stream about Cersei coming up in actually 2 weeks from today. We're taking your time slot because we are going to have Mikhail Schick on with us, and she can't join us on the Saturday slot that we usually do. So we've got her coming on to talk about Cersei, and then we'll be working on our next installment of Dance the Dragons.
Hell soon. Yeah, that's right. We sure will. Yeah, part 3 of our co-project there, our collab, where this interim time between A Dance with Dragons and A Feast for Crows is going to be one of my foci, but also other episodes as well. And Joe Buckley, what is up for you? You're going to be taking off a few weeks as well from Valar Rereadis, but that doesn't mean you're not doing other things, or are you?
Well, I would like a break, yes, but unfortunately not available to me. I'll firstly say thank you for having me back, of course, and to Lady Gwyn for having me yesterday. Then I'll apologise for my 3 calumnies earlier for making all those mistakes. But in terms of coming up, well, like you said earlier, I was lucky enough to talk about Lady Stoneheart on Radio Westeros yesterday. That was a lot of fun. But coming up, using this break to finally deliver my very patient patrons my reading of the Storm's End chapter from my Castles book, which I promised a long time ago, and Feast distracted me. So that will be coming up either this week or next week. And I also will be doing a kind of I'm going to try and make a little video of a kind of walking tour of Winterfell, because I was gifted for my birthday one of these 3D kind of folded paper models of Winterfell. If my camera was working, I would show you because it's next to me. You can have a look at Radio Westeros. They got a glimpse of it yesterday. Yeah. So I'm going to have a little look around the Winterfell there and compare it to the books and what we see in the show and stuff like that.
Cool. That sounds great. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Reading from your own book and all that's really good.
Not my idea, their idea. I wouldn't want to listen to it, but apparently patrons do.
So we have a question about recording dates for Minge Forever. I put up a poll on Patreon about changing the way we did the recordings for Valar Rereadis, but the vote was to keep it the same. So that's why I didn't bother to bring it up, because we're not doing anything terribly different. We thought about splitting it in half and doing half of each week on a Monday and the other half on a Wednesday. But it was a close vote, but the vote was to keep it the same. So we'll keep it all on Sunday going forward. We may reduce the number of chapters in some weeks to avoid the monster episodes that happen every once in a while. We don't really want it to be over 3 hours. But if it has to be, it will be. We're not going to cut short just for that reason. It's more important to get everything in there than it is to keep it short. But better to have both. We can be more lengthy if we do more episodes. And since Winds of Winter is not super imminent, we can take a little bit more time with that. So that will be the plan. Okay, so I also want to give some thanks to other folks. Of course, I want to thank our awesome History of Westeros mods that make our Facebook group great. That would be Jennifer, Rebecca, Laura, Scott, Tommy, and Ari. You guys are fantastic, and I love y'all. I hope to get to see you all soon as well at some sort of convention or event in the future. And big thanks to our contributors over at Flick. There's a lot of regulars who have been with us for a while, making comments on every single week's episodes, chapters, and that has been invaluable because you guys not only add things to the discussion, but you very often turn up things that some or none of us have considered. That's extremely invaluable. Also, thanks to people who have been joining our newer but burgeoning Discord and Slack communities. Lots of different options for where you can discuss History of Westeros. Make sure you go check out Here Be Dragons after this. Today, they are discussing the Hero's Journey arcs, and that's a cool topic. That's a great literary overall big macro topic that is, of course, touches on so many different stories. I wonder how they're going to approach this topic, because talk about a big one. That is a big one. So it's time for some patron shout outs, and I will see you guys all in a few weeks. We don't have our Dance with Dragons schedule yet because I wanted to make sure we finished all these side projects. Well, they're not side projects. They're other projects. These other projects first, and I don't know how long that's going to take. So I don't want to commit yet, but it's going to be before October. So it'll probably be mid to late September, but not too long. And in the meantime, we'll have other episodes. And of course, you can always be checking out all the other great fandom community podcasts and YouTube shows, especially Radio Westeros and Isle of Faces. So let's say our thanks to the patrons, and thanks to Ashea for being so awesome over there. She wasn't on mic today, but had to deal with the usual technical problems. This time it was more of a cat-related issue, but hey.
With shame on Xerxes.
Xerxes is to blame today. Thanks to the mysterious BR, our Hand of the King, Lord Stephen Stark, Titles, Hand of Queen Ashea, who is known as the best. Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire is Warden of the West. Lord George Stormsville the Cunning is Lord of the Chiliad and Warden of the East. Kabeth the Unfrozen, Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light is Defender of the Old Gods and Warden of the North. Lord Brendan Lannister is the Bloodline, ruler of Castle Everroar, Warden of the South. Lord James Tuttle is King of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea, commander of the Royal Fleet, consisting of the Narrow Fleet led by the flagship Caraxes and the Bloodstone Fleet led by flagship Prince Daemon. He doesn't understand this whole Feast for Crows business, being a seaman. You know, it's a feast for sharks. That's what they say in naval lingo. King Beyond the Wall, Sidney Jesse is the Fallborn, Lord of Blue Spring and the Haunted Forest, wields a dagger of Dragonglass and the Valyrian steel blade Redfrost. As a King Beyond the Wall, he, on the other hand, is very familiar with Feasts for Crows, having created a few himself. Our White Walker patrons include Araya Flint of the Mountain Flints, captured by the Weeper only to be raised in the Valley of the Milkwater, Blue Eyes, and Golden Memories. Alexander Greyblood is first of the First Men, now crowned in ice, called Silencebringer, Woodblinder, and the Snow of Night, wielder of the ice-forged greatsword Pale Frost. Our small council includes Lord Benjen of House Hornwood, Master of Laws, Laura Boros, the Lady of Infinity, Master of Coin, and Bloody Ben Blackwood, Master of Whispers. Looks like we got a couple of spots open if anyone's interested. Lord and ladies in their castles include Lady Direliz of Castle Naki, the Alpha Patron, Lord Dan of the Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell, Breaker of the Second Stone. Gregor the Toasty is still Lord of the Bread Fort, the most delicious of all the castles. Ashlyn Winter is the Hawk's Eye, Lady of Castle Skyfall. The Lord of the Halls of Castle Hillcrest is wielder of the Valyrian Steel Machete Everglazed. Lord Bemmy Snugglebunny is Guardian Ranger of the Hidden 100-Acre Werewood, dual wielder of Valyrian Short Swords Glorious Morning and Little Light Wise. Sharpshooter of the Werewood and Ironwood Laminated Longbow, Todd Von Oben. When you fear things cannot get worse, Snugglebunny enters the fray. The Bastard of the Wolf's Wood is First Forester of the Old Gods, sworn to House Ironwerewood. Listen for the silence. Casey Stark is of House Acres. Lady Raywin of House Dillsdane is the Star Spear, and congrats to y'all of House Dillsdane for baby Dillsdane on the way. Peter Rivers is the Pale Dragon and heir to Bloodraven. Lady Carlin Carey of Castle Stonesharp, whose horse is shod in Valyrian steel, is Lady Ryder of the Rising Hills. Lady Mora of House Stark is Archmistress of Apothecaries and Woods Witch. Her castle features werewood doors with painted moons. Thanks for the question, Stay, by the way, Mora. Charlie 11 of the Desert Stormborn, the Straight and the Stalwart, is Lord of Castle Bradley, Guardian of the Giant Stair, Defender of the Skirling Pass, Keeper of the High Ground, Wielder of the Werewood Staff, Concussion. Our King's Justice is Sir Troy the Steady, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Blade, Fate. Our Queen's High Council includes Rebea Stareyes, Lady of Waves and Mistress of Ships, Captain of the Iron Shadow Cat. In the shadows we bear our claws. Grand Archmaester Rennie, whose rod and ring and mask are Court's Crystal, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Pen, Fire and Ink. Lady Tracy the Ascendant, ruler of the Cloud Keep, is Master of Laws. And the Purple Lord, Leo Anansi, is Master of Whispers. Our Kingsguard includes Lord Commander Namian of House Darkland, the Night Slayer. Valyrian sword is called Onyx Abyss. He's backed by Sir Dean the White, Knight of the Black Star. Sir Gregor Snow, called Snowbear, a bastard of Winterfell. Vaughn of House Firster. Sigil is a mailed fist with an extended forefinger and pinky on a light blue field. Visenya let us hold Dark Sister once. Sir Bateman, the Dark Knight. Sir Roland de Stark, Gunslinger Knight of the Winter Kings, back from a 20-year ranging to the lands of Always Winter to protect his King Aziz. Well, thanks. And our Queen's Guard, protecting Ashea. Lord Captain Commander Haema Helmont, Sellsword Sentinel at the top, backed by Sir Rambo, Knight of House Gannon, First Blood. Amber the Adamant, the Knight of the Mist and Mother of Squids. The Wintry Wolverine's motto is, we finish what you begin. Nora Neko and Archmaester Vena, whose ring and rod and mask are made of steel, not pudding. Our Beard Guard is led by Lord Commander George the Golden, backed by Lady Rita of the Coppermane, the Unbound, Dance the Fervor. Hi, Rita. Sir Jeff, Warden of the AC, is wielder of Triad, the multifaceted beard of platinum, red, and brown. Stay frosty, my friends. Last but not least is our official... oh my goodness. I see what you did here, Shay. I forgot about this. On our webpage, Ashea changed the followers of the Seven to the Radio Westeros Dancers.
I've always wondered who those people are.
Well, I wasn't planning to read them, but what the heck? Because this name is so cool. Okay, so the Radio Westeros Dancers include Direwolf of the Rainwood, Mallory Sand, Witch of the Storm, Wolf Rider of Zulfrich, the Black Beast. That's Sandrixian, by the way. Yep.
Yeah.
Sir Aeron of Black Tide. What's that?
Right behind my head, too, that picture.
Nice. Yeah. We also have Sir Aeron of Black Tide, Knight of the Jade Wave. Scott Alexander, the Prince of Dragonflies.
He does dance.
He does dance. That's true. Scott does dance. Like a dragonfly. And Lord Brock of House Blacktree, the Badger King. Bailey Bloodaxe, the Warrior's Chosen. Flavored Annie of Stony Sept, a.k.a. I said flavored. Oh, my God. Favored Annie of Stony Sept, a.k.a. Annie the Graceful. Flavored Annie is a pretty good name, though.
Annie
the Tasteful.
Very tasteful.
That's pretty good. And Sir Delica Sir Source Delica of House Gramercy. We're having some comedy in the outro today. And finally, members of the History of Westeros Night's Watch. That's led by Lord Commander Richard the Ligerheart, wielder of Barry's Ankle Breaker, a flail with blue and silver Valyrian steel spikes. Motto, go blue. And he's backed up by First Builder Maegor Snow, a.k.a. Maegor the Cool, the Fire in the Snow. First Ranger Liam, aka Sir, waiting on a nickname, and First Steward Sir Jurian of the Torrentine, called Pale Wind. And that's it, everybody. Thanks again to our guests. Thanks again to Ashea. Thanks again to Michael Klarfeld and Joey Townsend and Jesse Koval and our Bengineer and all of you fine folks out there who have been with us through another book in Valar Rereadis. Stay tuned for more, and please tune in to Radio Westeros in general, but also during the interim while we are working on our other projects. And of course, check out Joe and Nina's stuff as well, please. Till next time, everybody, Valar Rereadis.